This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I've never shared this before, but I need to get it off my chest. This happened about 7 months ago, and I still get chills thinking about how differently things could have gone that night. I work as a night security guard at Centric's office tower in downtown. It's not the best area. We've had our share of break-ins, drug deals in the parking garage, that kind of thing. Nothing too major, but enough that we always have 2 guards on shift. My regular partner Jake called out sick for what ended up being a whole month. Appendix burst, poor guy. And management was dragging their feet on getting a temp replacement. Budget cuts, they said. So I was pulling solo shifts at this 18-floor office building with just me, my flashlight, and a radio that only connected to a dispatch center 20 minutes away. Great setup, right? It was my 3rd week alone when I first noticed them. 2 guys across the street, just standing there at around 11 p.m. One tall, one kinda average height, both wearing dark jackets despite it being pretty warm for April. They were just watching the building, not talking much to each other, not on phones, just observing. I didn't think much of it at first. People hang around downtown all the time for various reasons, not all of them good. But I kept an eye on them through the lobby windows for about 20 minutes while doing paperwork. Eventually they walked off, and I forgot about it. 2 nights later I spotted them again. Same spot, same time, same guys as far as I could tell. This time it bothered me more. Once is random, twice feels intentional. They stood there for almost 45 minutes, occasionally pointing at different parts of the building. I couldn't make out their faces from that distance, especially with the streetlights creating shadows. I decided to be proactive. If they were casing the place, which was the only explanation I could think of, I wanted them to know security was present and alert. I grabbed my flashlight and did a very visible exterior patrol, walking the perimeter of the building and making sure they saw me. When I got to the side where they were watching from, they both turned and walked away, heading north. Good, I thought. Problem solved. Just some wannabe thieves who realized the place was actively guarded. My shift continued like normal. At around 1 a.m., I went to the break room on the 3rd floor to eat my lunch. The main security desk has cameras, but I've found that staring at monitors all night makes me drowsy. Taking a proper break helps me stay alert for the second half of my shift. This break room was at the far end of the floor, away from the elevators. It's a weird layout. Riverdale Technologies, the main tenant in the building, has that whole floor set up with these L-shaped hallways and random storage rooms. I was about halfway through my sandwich when I heard a sound from somewhere on the floor, like someone bumped into something metal. Now, strange noises happen in big buildings all the time. HVAC systems kick on, pipes expand and contract, elevators move. But this sounded different, more immediate, more human. I put down my food and stepped out into the hallway, looking both ways. Nothing. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I walked about halfway down the hall toward the elevator bank, listening. Nothing else. After a minute or so, I shrugged it off and went back to finish my lunch. But something felt off. I couldn't enjoy my food anymore, and this nagging feeling kept tugging at me. Trust your gut, my training supervisor always said. So I did. After quickly finishing my sandwich, I decided to do an unscheduled patrol of the building, starting with the exterior. I took the elevator down to the lobby and walked the perimeter outside. Everything looked normal. No suspicious cars in the parking lot, no one hanging around. The street was empty except for a few cars passing by. I had just convinced myself I was being paranoid when I decided to check the emergency exits as well. There are 4 emergency exits around the building, all alarmed and locked from the outside. The back exit also has a heavy-duty padlock as an extra security measure. Fire code violation, probably, but not my call. As I rounded the corner to check it, my heart nearly stopped. The padlock was on the ground, snapped clean in half. The door, which should have been shut tight, was slightly ajar. Someone was inside the building. My mind raced. Protocol said I should call for backup immediately, but backup was just that useless dispatch center that would take forever to send anyone. I needed to know what I was dealing with first. I pulled out my phone and called 911, keeping my voice low, explaining that I had evidence of a break-in at the office tower and needed police. The dispatcher said they'd send someone, but it might take 15-20 minutes given current call volume. Great. I headed back to the main security office on the first floor, moving as quietly as possible. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure anyone in the building could hear it. The security office is a small room with monitors showing feeds from the building's cameras. Not every area is covered, but I hoped I could spot whoever had broken in. What I saw on those screens made my blood run cold. After rewinding the exterior camera footage, I saw the same 2 men from across the street. They hadn't actually left the area when I did my patrol. They'd just circled around to the back of the building where camera coverage was minimal. The timestamp showed they'd waited about 30 minutes after I went inside before approaching the emergency exit. One kept watch while the other worked on the padlock with what looked like bolt cutters. I switched to interior cameras and frantically scanned through the footage, trying to figure out where they were now. That's when I saw something that still haunts me. The camera near the 3rd floor elevator bank showed them getting off the elevator at 12:57 a.m., right before I took my lunch break. They moved cautiously, one of them holding what looked like a knife, the other possibly a small handgun. They checked rooms systematically until they reached the hallway leading to the break room. Then I saw myself walk out of the break room, looking around after hearing the noise. As I moved toward the elevator bank, one of the intruders was pressed against the wall around the corner of the L-shaped hallway, not 10 feet from where I stopped. If I had walked just a few more steps, we would have come face to face. I watched, horrified, as I turned around and went back to the break room, completely unaware of how close I'd been to them. The timestamp showed they waited, perfectly still, for 2 full minutes before continuing down the hall in the opposite direction. The rest of the footage showed them methodically checking several rooms on that floor before entering Riverdale Technologies' main server room. They spent about 8 minutes in there, then left through the same emergency exit right around the time I started my exterior patrol. The timing was so precise it was terrifying. If I hadn't felt uneasy and decided to check outside again, I likely would have encountered them in the building. I was still processing this when I heard sirens outside. The police had arrived faster than expected. I met them at the front entrance, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. 4 officers came in, and I quickly showed them the footage and the broken emergency exit. They did a sweep of the building but found no one. The server room showed signs of tampering. Several hard drives had been removed from their racks. When I called the emergency contact for Riverdale Technologies, the IT director rushed in looking pale and stressed. He wouldn't tell me exactly what was on those drives, just that it was sensitive company information. The way he and the company VP who showed up later were whispering and looking around nervously told me it was something more serious than typical corporate data. The police took my statement and copies of the security footage, but I never heard anything more about the investigation. The image quality wasn't great, especially in the dimly lit hallways, and the men had kept their faces mostly hidden. When I followed up a week later, the detective just said they were pursuing leads, the universal code for "we've got nothing." Riverdale Technologies installed additional security measures the very next day. New cameras, better locks, the works. They also hired a second night guard immediately. No more excuses about budget constraints. Whatever was stolen must have been extremely valuable or damaging. I still work at the tower, but I can't shake the feeling that I was being watched and studied for weeks before that night. Those men knew exactly when I took my breaks, which parts of the building had blind spots, and how long it would take me to respond to a disturbance. They'd been planning this carefully, and I had been completely oblivious. What keeps me up at night isn't just how close I came to confronting armed intruders. It's wondering why they were so interested in that server room specifically. What did they take? Who were they working for? And most disturbing of all, what would have happened if I had taken just a few more steps down that hallway and turned the corner? Sometimes when I'm doing my rounds, I find myself stopping at that same spot in the hallway, staring at the corner and thinking about how differently things could have gone that night. The thought that I was just seconds and a few steps away from potentially being attacked or killed makes me break out in a cold sweat every time. 7 months later, and I still don't have answers. The company never disclosed what was stolen. The police investigation seemed to quietly disappear. But I remain vigilant, always looking over my shoulder, always checking the street across from the building, always wondering if those men are still out there, watching and waiting for another opportunity. I'll never take a solo patrol for granted again. And I'll never ignore that gut feeling that says something isn't right. Because sometimes that feeling is the only thing standing between you and a nightmare you can't wake up from. I can't sleep. Not since last Monday. My insomnia's gotten so bad that my doctor prescribed me something stronger than the over-the-counter stuff, but I'm almost afraid to take it. Being unconscious feels dangerous now. I need to stay alert. I work night shifts at Pinewood Memorial's ER, managing patient intake at the front desk. It's not glamorous work, but I've been doing it for almost 3 years now, and I'm used to the rhythm of overnight shifts. The fluorescent lights, the occasional rush of trauma cases, the long stretches of quiet. You develop a sixth sense in a hospital at night. Something was off that Monday. It was around 2 a.m., one of those eerily quiet nights where even the usual drunk and disorderly cases hadn't shown up yet. Amy, who usually works the desk with me, had just left for her cafeteria break. "Want anything?" she'd asked. I shook my head, already pulling out my sad little packed lunch. The ER waiting room was empty except for an elderly man dozing in the corner, waiting for news about his wife. I remember I was entering insurance information into the system when I got that feeling. You know the one, like someone's watching you. I glanced up, and there he was, standing perfectly still about 5 feet from the desk. I hadn't heard him approach, which was the first thing that bothered me. The ER doors make a distinctive whooshing sound, and our floor tiles echo with footsteps. But somehow, this guy had gotten within a few feet of me without making a sound. He was wearing a black hoodie pulled partially over his face, jeans and dirty sneakers. Nothing particularly unusual for a late-night ER visit, I guess, but something about him made my skin crawl instantly. He was maybe mid-30s with dark eyes that looked wrong somehow, too focused, too intent. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound professional despite the sudden dryness in my throat. He stood there staring at me for a moment longer than felt natural before responding. "I'm looking for Hannah Smith," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "She was brought in tonight." I checked our system, even though I knew we hadn't admitted anyone by that name during my shift. We had only 4 patients in the ER that night, and I had processed all of them. "I'm sorry, we don't have any patient registered under that name. Are you sure she was brought to this hospital?" I asked. He leaned forward slightly. "Check again." The way he said it made my stomach tighten, not angry or demanding, but completely flat, emotionless. I made a show of checking the computer again, while discreetly glancing toward Paul, our security guard, who was stationed near the entrance. Paul had noticed us and was watching with mild interest. "No, sir. We definitely don't have a Hannah Smith here tonight. Could she be at County General? They're about 15 minutes east of here." The man shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving my face. "She told me she'd be here." Then he just stood there, staring at me. "Would you like me to check if she's been admitted to a different department?" I offered, mostly to break the uncomfortable silence. "No." Another long pause. "What time do you get off?" My blood went cold. That's not a question anyone should ask a hospital employee, especially not at 2 a.m. with that intense stare. I immediately went into autopilot, the kind of professional voice we use with agitated patients. "Sir, I can't provide that information. If you'd like, I can have security help you locate your friend at another facility." At the mention of security, his eyes finally flickered away from my face, glancing briefly toward Paul, who had straightened up and was now watching us more intently. The man stepped back from the desk. "Never mind. I'll find her myself." He turned and walked out, his movements stiff and deliberate. I watched through the glass doors as he crossed the ambulance bay and disappeared into the parking lot. Paul came over immediately. "Everything okay, Sarah? That guy giving you trouble?" I explained what happened, and Paul radioed the parking lot security to keep an eye out, but honestly, we both kind of laughed it off. Working nights in an ER, you get used to weird interactions. People come in distressed, on drugs, confused. It's just part of the job. Still, I couldn't shake the unsettled feeling. Amy came back from her break, and I told her about it. "What a creep," she said, rolling her eyes, probably high on something. The rest of the shift passed without incident. The usual sprinkle of patients, a kid with a high fever, a kitchen accident requiring stitches, nothing major. By the time 4 a.m. rolled around and my replacement arrived, I'd almost put the strange man out of my mind. Our hospital has this massive parking lot, and staff have to park in the far back section to leave closer spots for patients. It's a good 5-minute walk from the ER entrance, poorly lit in some areas. I've complained about it before, especially for night shift workers, but administration never does anything. As I walked to my car that morning, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. The parking lot was mostly empty, just scattered cars belonging to other night shift workers and a few patients' vehicles. Nothing seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake that feeling of being watched. I picked up my pace, clutching my keys between my fingers. That self-defense technique women learn early on. When I finally reached my Toyota, I did a quick check of the back seat before unlocking the door and sliding in. I locked the doors immediately, started the engine, and sat there for a minute, letting the heat kick in while scanning the parking lot. Nothing. No one. Just rows of empty parking spaces and the distant lights of the hospital. I drove home, a drive I've made hundreds of times before. It's about 20 minutes from the hospital to my house in Oak Ridge, a quiet suburban neighborhood where I've lived for 5 years. Nothing remarkable about the drive that morning, except I kept checking my rear-view mirror more than usual. No headlights followed me consistently, no cars that seemed suspicious. I pulled into my driveway around 4:30 a.m. Usually I park in the garage, but I'd left some gardening supplies spread out in there over the weekend and hadn't bothered to clean them up yet. So I just parked in the driveway, grabbed my purse and lunch bag, and headed to the front door. My house was dark and quiet as I unlocked the door. I stepped inside, flicked on the entry light, and was about to close the door behind me when I heard it, the sound of rapidly approaching footsteps on my walkway. Before I could react, someone reached the porch and the doorknob rattled violently. I slammed the door shut and engaged the deadbolt, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "Sarah?" a voice called from the other side of the door, the same soft, emotionless voice from the hospital. "Sarah, open the door. I need help." I backed away, fumbling for my phone. How did he know my name? How did he know where I lived? "Sarah, please, just let me in so we can talk." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. When the dispatcher answered, I whispered frantically that someone was trying to break into my house, giving them my address between gasping breaths. "Is he still there?" the dispatcher asked. I crept to the window beside the door and carefully peered through a crack in the blinds. The porch was empty. "I don't see him," I whispered, "but he was just here." I gave them a description while checking that all my windows and doors were locked. The dispatcher said officers were on their way and to stay on the line. Those 10 minutes waiting for the police were the longest of my life. I huddled in my bedroom closet, phone clutched to my ear, listening for any sound of breaking glass or footsteps in my house. The dispatcher kept talking to me, keeping me calm, asking questions about the man, whether I knew him, if there was anyone who had a grudge against me. When the police finally arrived, they searched my house and yard thoroughly. Nothing, no sign of forced entry, no footprints in the soft garden soil beneath my windows. I was starting to wonder if exhaustion from my shift had made me hallucinate the whole thing. Then one of the officers called me outside. "Ma'am, is this your car?" he asked, pointing to my Toyota in the driveway. "Yes," I said, confused. He shone his flashlight toward the rear of my car. The back door was standing wide open. It took a moment for the implication to sink in. Then the officer explained what they thought had happened. The man from the hospital had followed me to the parking lot and somehow gotten into my back seat while I was getting in the front. He had hidden there during my entire drive home. When I parked in the driveway instead of the garage and went inside, he had gotten out of the car and approached my front door. If I had parked in the garage like I normally do, I couldn't stop shaking. The idea that he had been inches away from me, silently watching from the back seat while I drove, oblivious. The police took my statement, dusted for prints, and checked the hospital security footage I told them about. They increased patrols in my neighborhood for the next few days, but I couldn't stay there. I packed a bag and went to my parents' house that same morning. 3 days later, I got a call from Detective Ramirez. They'd identified the man from hospital CCTV and arrested him at a motel just outside town. His name isn't important, but what matters is that he had no connection to me whatsoever before that night. No mutual friends, no previous interactions that either of us knew about. He had just seen me at the hospital during a visit weeks earlier and became fixated. They found notes in his motel room, pages of observations about my schedule, what time I left work, what days I stopped for coffee, when I usually went to the grocery store. He'd been watching me for weeks, learning my routines, waiting for a chance. When they questioned him about his intentions that night, He kept repeating that he just wanted to talk to me. That's it. No other explanation. It's been a week now. I've taken leave from work. I'm staying with my parents, sleeping on their couch because I can't bear to be alone in a bedroom. I flinch at every unexpected noise. I check the back seat of my car obsessively now, even in broad daylight. The worst part is knowing that the only reason I'm alive is because I was too lazy to clean up my gardening supplies. If I had parked in my garage like I usually do, he would have had access to my house before I could lock the door. I keep thinking about those moments in my car, singing along to the radio, adjusting the heat, completely unaware that someone was lying flat on the floor of my back seat, watching, waiting, breathing silently, just inches behind me. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. It's been almost a year since it happened, but I still get chills thinking about that night at the 7-Eleven. I keep going over the details in my head, trying to make sense of it all. I honestly don't know if I'm more freaked out about what actually happened or what could have happened if things had gone differently. I was 24 at the time, trying to finish my business degree online while working these dead-end night shifts to pay my bills. The Clearwater 7-Eleven was perfect for me. I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and most nights were so dead that I could get 3 or 4 hours of schoolwork done between customers. My manager didn't care as long as I kept the place clean and didn't miss any sales. This happened last February, during a really cold, wet week in Florida. I remember it was a Tuesday night, and the rain had been coming down steadily for hours, the kind of weather that keeps everyone inside. I hadn't seen a customer since a drunk guy stumbled in for cigarettes around 1 a.m., which was fine by me. I had this big marketing assignment due by noon, and I was making good progress. Around 3:15 a.m., I heard the swoosh of tires on wet pavement and saw headlights pull into the lot. Some older model Chevy sedan, dark blue or black, hard to tell in the rain and poor lighting. A man got out and hustled through the rain to the door, the electronic bell chiming as he entered. First impression, nothing special. White guy, maybe early to mid-30s, average height, kind of stocky. He had this scraggly beard that needed trimming and wore a gray hoodie under a denim jacket. His jeans were wet at the bottom from the rain. I gave him the standard, "Hey, how's it going?" And he just nodded, not making eye contact. He wandered around for a few minutes, picking things up and putting them back down. I didn't pay much attention. Went back to my laptop but kept glancing up. He never actually grabbed anything to buy. Eventually, he just walked out. Didn't say a word. Just left. I remember thinking it was a little weird, but nothing to worry about. Maybe he didn't find what he wanted, or maybe he was just killing time. I went back to my assignment, trying to finish this section on consumer behavior. About 30 minutes later, I heard a car again. Looking up, I saw what looked like the same dark sedan. I didn't think much of it initially. People forget stuff all the time. But when he came in, something felt different. There was this intensity about him that wasn't there before. This time he came straight to the counter. His hoodie was soaked through now, and he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Bathroom?" he asked, his voice deeper than I expected. Our bathroom is for customers only, technically, but I never enforce that during night shifts. It's just not worth the hassle. "Around the corner past the drink coolers," I told him, pointing to the back of the store. He nodded and headed straight there. I heard the door close and lock. I went back to my assignment, but couldn't focus as well. Something felt off about the guy, but I couldn't place what exactly. Maybe it was just late, and I was being paranoid. 10 minutes passed. then 15. At 20 minutes, I started to wonder if everything was okay. I'd occasionally get homeless people who'd try to wash up in the bathroom, but this guy didn't look homeless. At 25 minutes, I was getting annoyed. We only had the one bathroom, and what if another customer needed it? I considered knocking but kept talking myself out of it. What was I going to say? "Excuse me, sir. You've been in the bathroom too long." It felt awkward and confrontational, and the guy was probably just sick or something. So I waited. Almost 30 minutes after he went in, I was seriously considering knocking when I saw a police cruiser pull into the lot. The officer didn't park in a regular spot. He slowly circled around the sedan, shining his spotlight on it. I watched as he got out, looked through the windows, then wrote something down. My heart started beating faster. There was clearly something wrong with that car or its owner. The officer came in, a tall black guy, probably in his 40s, with the kind of serious expression that immediately makes you nervous. "Evening," he said, approaching the counter. "That dark Chevy in the lot. The owner inside?" My mouth went dry. "Yeah, he's been in the bathroom for like 30 minutes. The officer's face changed immediately. 30 minutes? You sure?" I nodded, pointing toward the back. Single bathroom around the corner. Without another word, he headed straight for it, one hand resting on his gun. He knocked firmly on the door. "Police officer, open up." No response. He knocked again, harder this time. "Police, open the door now." Still nothing. The officer turned to me. "You have a key?" I fumbled under the counter and found the bathroom key we keep for emergencies. My hands were shaking as I handed it over. The officer took it and said, "Stay at the counter." His tone left no room for argument. I watched as he unlocked the door, one hand still on his weapon. He pushed it open slowly, calling out again. Then he entered the bathroom. A moment later he came back out, looking confused and concerned. "There's no one in there." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What? That's impossible. I never saw him come out." "You're absolutely certain he didn't leave?" the officer asked, studying my face. 100%. I've been at this counter the whole time. The only door is right there, and I would have seen him. The bell would have rung. The officer looked around, then his eyes moved upward. I followed his gaze to the drop ceiling. Some of the panels were the removable type. "Shit," he muttered, then grabbed his radio. "This is Officer Daniels. I need backup at the 7-Eleven on Gulf to Bay. Possible 1031 hiding in the building. Suspect matches the description from the APB." My blood ran cold. 1031? I knew enough to know that was some kind of criminal activity. "Stay at the counter, don't approach anyone, and call 911 if you see this individual before my backup arrives," the officer instructed me. Over the next few minutes, the officer checked the rest of the store. Behind displays, in the coolers, anywhere someone could hide. I stood frozen at the counter, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. The glass windows made me feel like I was in a fishbowl. Anyone could see in, but I couldn't see out into the darkness. Within maybe 15 minutes, 3 more patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing but silent. Officers entered, some with hands on their weapons. They spoke briefly to Officer Daniels, then 2 of them grabbed a step ladder from their cruiser. They positioned it in the bathroom, and 1 officer climbed up. I couldn't see what was happening, but suddenly there was a lot of shouting and thumping noises. It sounded like someone was moving around up there fast. "Police! Don't move! Hands where I can see them!" More thumping, then a crash as something or someone fell. More shouting, the sounds of a struggle. Minutes later, they emerged with the bearded man in handcuffs. His hoodie was covered in dust from the ceiling, and there was a wild look in his eyes that made my skin crawl. As they led him past me, he looked directly at me for the first time. His expression, I still can't describe it properly. It wasn't anger, it was something colder, more calculating, like he was memorizing my face. They took him outside to a patrol car. One of the officers stayed behind to talk to me, a female officer named Martinez. She asked me questions about when he came in, his behavior, everything I could remember. "Do you know who that is?" she asked after I'd given her all the details. I shook my head. "His name is Eric Roth. He's wanted in connection with 3 assaults and 1 homicide in Pinellas County over the last 2 months. I felt sick. "What kind of assaults?" She hesitated. "He's been targeting people working alone at night. Gas stations, convenience stores, a hotel desk clerk." "And the homicide?" "A night security guard at a storage facility. Roth hid inside the building until the guard was alone, then attacked him from behind." My legs nearly gave out. I had to grab the counter to steady myself. "You don't know how lucky you are that Officer Daniels spotted his vehicle," she continued. "Roth's been on our radar for weeks. Daniels recognized the car from an alert that went out yesterday." When I asked why he was hiding in the ceiling, Officer Martinez looked grim. "Based on his pattern, he was likely waiting for you to close up or for a quiet moment when no customers were around. The bathroom has a direct line of sight to the counter. He could have watched through the ceiling vent until the right moment." They took my statement officially, and I had to go to the station the next day to sign some papers. They told me Roth wasn't talking, so they couldn't say for sure if he was running from the police or planning to attack me. Maybe both. But given his history, they were pretty sure I was going to be his next victim. I quit that job the next day. My manager tried to convince me to stay, saying they'd add security measures, but I couldn't shake the image of that guy watching me from above the ceiling, waiting for the right moment. I couldn't stop imagining what would have happened if Officer Daniels hadn't spotted his car. I still think about all the little decisions that saved my life that night. If I had confronted him about being in the bathroom too long, if I had tried to check on him myself, if Officer Daniels had driven by 5 minutes later, if Roth had parked somewhere less visible. I've got a day job now at a busy office with lots of people around. I still get nervous in empty buildings or when I'm alone at night. Sometimes I have dreams where I hear noises in the ceiling above me, soft footsteps moving across the tiles. I wake up sweating, my heart racing. The scariest part? The ceiling in my apartment is the same type of drop ceiling they had at the 7-Eleven. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I stare up at those panels and wonder how easy it would be for someone to hide up there, watching and waiting. I'm still not sleeping right. It's been almost 3 months, but every time there's a noise outside, I freeze. My therapist says it's hypervigilance, my body's way of staying safe. But knowing that doesn't make it any easier to calm down when I hear footsteps on the sidewalk outside my house. It started in early October. Nothing dramatic, just something that made me pause for a second before going back to my spreadsheets. I'd been working from home for almost 2 years by then, and my upstairs office has this big window that faces the street. It gives me great light, but also a clear view of anyone approaching the house, which I used to think was a good thing. That Tuesday was perfectly normal. Fall was just starting to kick in, with that crisp smell in the air that makes you want to drink hot cider and get cozy. I had my window cracked open to enjoy the breeze while I worked. Around 2 p.m. I glanced up from my computer during a brief mental break and noticed a man standing at the end of my driveway. He wasn't doing anything, really, just standing there looking up at my house. He wore a dark jacket, jeans, nothing remarkable. But something about the way he stood, completely still, just staring, made me uncomfortable. I watched him for maybe 30 seconds before he simply turned and walked away down the street. I remember thinking it was weird but not threatening. Maybe he was looking for an address or admiring the house, though my little two-bedroom isn't exactly a showstopper. I went back to work and forgot about it until the next day. Wednesday was when it got harder to ignore. I was on a Zoom call with my team when movement outside caught my eye. There he was again, same spot at the end of my driveway, same stance, same staring. My heart did this little stutter thing, and I completely lost track of what my manager was saying. I muted myself and moved closer to the window, trying to get a better look without being obvious. He stood there for at least 3 minutes this time, never moving, just staring up at what I realized with growing unease was my office window. I couldn't see his face clearly. He was maybe 40 feet away, but I swear he was looking right at me. Then, just like the day before, he walked away without doing anything else. After the call ended, I went downstairs and out to my driveway, standing exactly where he'd been. From that spot, I could see straight into my office window. My desk was clearly visible. Me, working there all day, was clearly visible. I spent the rest of the workday with my blinds closed, which made my office feel like a cave. I couldn't focus. I kept wondering if he was back out there, waiting for me to peek out. By evening, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. 2 weird incidents didn't make a stalker, right? Just some guy who happened to walk by my house twice. It happens. I settled in to watch some mindless TV to distract myself. Around 8:30, I heard footsteps coming up my front walk. Not the sidewalk, but the actual path to my door. Slow, deliberate steps. My whole body tensed. The TV kept playing, but I couldn't hear it anymore over the sound of my heartbeat. The footsteps stopped at my door. No knock, just silence. I sat there, remote clutched in my hand, waiting. After what felt like forever but was probably only a minute, I heard the footsteps retreating. I counted to 20, then crept to the window and peered through a crack in the blinds. No one there. I waited another few minutes before working up the courage to check the door. When I opened it, there was a piece of paper taped at eye level. My hand shook as I pulled it off. The note was typed in a basic font, centered on the page. "Have a good evening, Robin." My name. My fucking name. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed away like the paper might burst into flames. How did he know my name? I'd never spoken to this person. How long had he been watching me? I called the police, hands trembling so badly I could barely hit the numbers. The officer who took my report was polite, but not exactly rushing to help. He asked if I'd received any threats. No. If I knew who might be doing this. No. If I'd had any strange encounters recently. No. He said they'd make a note to have patrol cars go by my place more frequently for a few days, but without an explicit threat or identification of the person, there wasn't much they could do. Keep your doors locked, windows closed. Maybe stay with a friend for a few days if you're worried, he suggested before leaving. I called my sister in Cleveland, who offered to come stay with me, but she couldn't get here until the weekend. My parents live in Florida now. My closest friend had just left for a work trip to Austin. I was on my own, at least for tonight. I double-checked every lock, closed every blind, and even dragged my dresser in front of my bedroom door before trying to sleep. I left all the lights on. Still, I just lay there, listening to every creak and settling noise my old house made, imagining footsteps where there weren't any, until 2:13 a.m. when I heard actual knocking. It wasn't frantic or aggressive. That would have been less terrifying somehow. This was slow, rhythmic, knock, knock, knock. A perfect steady beat with about 3 seconds between each one. I sat bolt upright, my whole body cold with fear. My phone was charging on my nightstand, and I grabbed it with shaking hands, ready to call 911. But first, I opened my home security app. I have these cheap cameras at my front and back doors that I'd installed after a break-in at my neighbor's last year. The front door camera showed a figure standing on my porch. In the low-quality night vision, I could only make out that it was a man, average height, wearing what looked like the same dark jacket, just standing there, knocking with mechanical precision. Knock, knock, knock. I hit 911 and whispered my address as soon as the operator answered. I explained there was someone at my door, that he'd been watching my house, that he'd left a note with my name. They promised officers were on their way. The knocking continued the entire time I was on the phone, never speeding up, never slowing down, never stopping, just that relentless, patient rhythm, like he had all the time in the world. Then, mid-knock, he stopped, his head turned slightly as if listening, and suddenly he was gone from the camera view. I heard quick footsteps retreating down my front walk, then nothing. 3 minutes later, a police car pulled up with its lights off. 2 officers checked around my house and the neighboring yards but found no one. They took my statement and the note as evidence. One of them suggested it might be someone who knows me from work or social media, gathering information online. The thought that this person had researched me enough to know my name made me feel even more violated. After they left, I sat in my living room with all the lights on until morning. I called in sick to work and spent the day looking into security systems, checking that my social media was locked down, and calling a locksmith to upgrade my doors. My sister arrived Friday evening and stayed for a week. Nothing happened while she was here. No sign of the man, no more notes. The police did extra patrols as promised, but reported nothing suspicious. I started to wonder if maybe he'd moved on, or if the police presence had scared him off. After my sister left, I was jumpy for a few days, but nothing happened. Weeks passed. I kept my blinds closed during the day and stopped working near windows. I installed motion sensor lights, got a doorbell camera with better quality, and even adopted a large, loud dog from the shelter. It's been almost 3 months now. I haven't seen him again, but I still feel watched sometimes. I still struggle to sleep through the night. I keep wondering who he was and what he wanted. Was it random? Did he target me specifically? Will he come back when I've finally started to feel safe again? The most terrifying part isn't what happened, it's the not knowing. Not knowing who he is or why he chose my house, my window, my name. Not knowing if he's gone for good or just waiting. Sometimes I imagine him still standing at the end of my driveway, patient, watching, even when I know there's no one there. My therapist says time will help, that eventually this will feel like a strange, scary chapter rather than my everyday reality. I want to believe her. But right now, sitting in my living room with my dog asleep at my feet, I still find myself listening for that steady knock on my door. I never thought much about the walking path to my house until 3 weeks ago. It's just this long dirt trail that cuts through the woods outside Pinewood, connecting our property to the main road. Been walking it my whole life, every school day, twice a day, for years. My parents always said we were lucky to have our little slice of nowhere. but sometimes being the only house at the end of a half-mile forest trail doesn't feel so lucky, especially when the bus doesn't come out this far and you're trudging through slush in February. But I didn't mind it, really. I actually liked having that time to myself in the mornings, headphones in, watching the seasons change around me. The trail's pretty narrow in spots where the trees crowd in, but it's wide enough for a car to get through, which is how my parents get to work and back. We don't get visitors much. Nobody really comes down our trail unless they have a reason to be at our house. That's why I noticed the car right away. It was a Tuesday morning, nothing special about it. I had a calculus test I wasn't prepared for, and I was running through formulas in my head when I rounded the bend about halfway down our trail and saw it. This old gray Honda Civic just sitting there, pulled off to the side but definitely blocking part of the narrow path. The engine was running. I could see exhaust in the cold air. At first I thought maybe someone had car trouble, but that made no sense. Our trail doesn't go anywhere except to our house. There's no reason for anyone to be parked there unless they were coming to see us and we weren't expecting anyone. I slowed down as I got closer, trying to decide if I should turn around or keep going. That's when I noticed the woman in the driver's seat. She was just sitting there, staring straight ahead. She had this mess of black hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in days, and even from a distance, I could see the dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel tight, like she was forcing herself to stay put. Something about the way she sat there made my skin crawl. There was no reason for her to be on our trail. None. I decided to just keep walking. I had my phone if anything happened, and I was already running late. As I passed by her car, I kept my eyes forward, but I could feel her watching me. Not just glancing, really staring. I didn't look directly at her, but in my peripheral vision, I saw her head turn, following me as I walked past. I picked up my pace a bit, feeling that weird tingle you get when someone's eyes are boring into your back. When I got to the main road, I looked back, half expecting to see her car following me. But the trail was empty. She was still back there, just waiting. For what? I had no idea. By the time school was over, I'd mostly forgotten about it. I had bombed my calc test, and I was busy being pissed at myself for that. When I got back to the trail entrance, I actually paused for a second, wondering if she'd still be there. But that was stupid. No one sits in their car on a dirt road all day. I laughed at myself and started down the path. The car was gone, of course. Everything was normal. But for some reason, I still felt uneasy, like something was off. I took out my earbuds and walked in silence, listening to the woods around me. Nothing unusual, just the normal forest sounds. When I got home, my mom was already there, which was weird because she usually works until 6. She was in the kitchen chopping vegetables with way more force than necessary. She looked up when I came in, and I could tell something was bothering her. "Hey," I said, dropping my backpack. "You're home early." "How was your walk home?" she asked, ignoring my comment. That's when I remembered the woman in the car. "Fine, normal. But there was this weird lady parked on our trail this morning." My mom's knife stopped mid-chop. "What lady? What did she look like?" The intensity of her reaction caught me off guard. "I don't know. Some woman in a gray Honda. Black hair, looked kind of rough, like she hadn't slept or something." My mom put down the knife and grabbed her phone. "Was she still there when you came home?" "No, she was gone." "Mom, what's going on?" She ignored me and called my dad. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it was enough to know something was seriously wrong. "She was on the trail this morning. Mason saw her." "No, She was gone when he came home. I don't know, he just walked right past her. Well, how should I know if she recognized him? Yes, now. When she hung up, she turned to me with this forced smile. Your dad's coming home early. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Mom, what's going on? Who was that woman? Probably nobody, she said, but her voice was tight. Just someone who took a wrong turn, but I want you to tell me if you see her again, okay? Right away. Is she dangerous or something? My mom hesitated. I don't think so, but we don't need strangers hanging around our property. That night, I overheard my parents arguing in their bedroom. They were trying to keep their voices down, but our house isn't that big, and sound carries. We have to call the police, my mom was saying. And tell them what? My dad shot back. That someone parked on a public access road? They'll laugh us off. It's her, Ted. You know it's her. You don't know that. It could be anyone. Black hair, those eyes Mason described. Who else would sit there watching our house after all this time? It's been 19 years. You think that matters to someone like her? I couldn't make sense of what they were talking about. But their fear was real. For the next week, they completely rearranged their work schedules, so one of them could drive me to school every morning and pick me up every afternoon. Neither of them would explain why, just that they were being cautious. My dad kept checking the locks before bed, and my mom started keeping the blinds drawn all the time. The following Monday, they both had meetings they couldn't miss. My dad had to be in the city by 7:30, which meant leaving by 6, and my mom had a client presentation at 8. They seemed really stressed about it the night before. I can walk, I told them. I've been walking to school for years. It's fine. We'll figure something out, my dad said, but I could tell they were out of options. The next morning, my mom walked me to the door, looking like she hadn't slept. Text me when you get to school, she said, handing me a travel mug of coffee. And call immediately if you see anything unusual, anything at all. Mom, it's just a 10-minute walk down our trail, the same one I've taken literally thousands of times. Just promise me, Mason. Fine, I promise. I headed out, thinking they were being completely paranoid. The morning was foggy, with that weird gray half-light that makes the woods look different. I was about halfway down the trail when the fog parted enough for me to see it. The same gray Honda, parked in almost exactly the same spot as before. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stopped dead in my tracks, suddenly understanding why my parents had been so freaked out. This wasn't random. This person, whoever she was, had waited a week and come back to the exact same spot. I turned to head back home, but then I had another thought. I could just cut through the woods. There was no real path, but I knew these woods well enough. If I veered off to the right and worked my way through the trees, I could come out on the main road about a quarter-mile past where her car was parked. She'd never even see me. I stepped off the trail into the underbrush, moving as quietly as I could. The ground was soft from recent rain, which helped muffle my footsteps, but it also meant I was leaving obvious tracks. I worked my way through the trees, trying to keep the trail in sight while staying hidden. I'd gone maybe 50 yards when I heard it, a car engine starting up. She was moving. I froze behind a thick pine tree, watching through the branches. The gray Honda slowly rolled forward, coming in my direction. She was driving deeper down our trail toward our house. Then the car stopped. The driver's door opened, and she got out. In the foggy morning light, she looked even more disheveled than I remembered. Her black hair hung limply around her pale face, and she wore a baggy gray sweatshirt that seemed to swallow her thin frame. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the woods, scanning for me, I realized with growing horror. "Mason," she called, her voice eerily calm and light, like we were playing some game. "Mason Collins." My blood turned to ice. She knew my name, my full name. "I know you're out there," she continued in this weird, affectionate tone that made my skin crawl. "I just want to talk to you, sweetheart." There was something profoundly wrong with her voice. It was both gentle and completely empty at the same time, like someone doing an impression of a caring person without understanding what caring actually feels like. She took a few steps toward the woods where I was hiding, her head tilted as if listening. I ducked lower behind the tree, trying not to breathe. Through a gap in the branches, I could see her face clearly for the first time. Her eyes were the worst part, flat and lifeless, like a doll's eyes, but with this terrible intensity behind them as she scanned the forest. "Don't be scared," she called out, still in that horrible, gentle voice. "I've waited so long to see you." She took another step toward the woods, and I could tell she had spotted my tracks in the mud. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, no longer caring about being quiet. Behind me, I heard her call out again, but I didn't stop to listen. I broke through the trees about 100 yards further down and hit the main road running. I sprinted all the way home, constantly looking over my shoulder, terrified I'd see her gray Honda coming after me. When I burst through our front door, I was gasping for breath. I slammed the door shut and locked it, then grabbed my phone and called my mom. She picked up on the first ring. "Mason? What's wrong?" "She's back," I panted. "The woman, she's on our trail again. She got out of her car and, Mom, she knows my name. She called me by my full name." There was silence on the other end. Then my mom said, "Lock all the doors and windows. I'm calling your father, and then I'm calling the police. Don't open the door for anyone except us or an officer. Do you understand?" "Mom, who is she? What does she want?" Another pause. "We'll explain everything when we get home. Just stay inside and keep the doors locked." Both my parents got home in record time. My dad arrived first, and he immediately went around checking every window and door in the house. My mom showed up 10 minutes later with 2 police officers. They took my statement about what had happened, looking grave when I mentioned she knew my full name. After the officers left to search the trail, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table. They looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations parents have sometimes, before my dad finally spoke. "Mason, the woman you saw, we think she's my ex-wife, Caroline." I stared at him, confused. "Ex-wife? You were married before Mom?" He nodded. "Briefly, almost 20 years ago, before you were born. She has severe mental health issues," my mom added gently. "The kind that, well, she becomes fixated on things, on people. She becomes obsessive during episodes," my dad continued. "Dangerously so. That's why our marriage ended. She started having delusions, refusing treatment. When she's on her medication, she can function normally, but when she's not..." He trailed off. "We thought this was all behind us," my mom said. "It's been years since we've heard anything about her. The last time was when you were just a baby." "Wait," I said, struggling to process this. "She's been watching me since I was a baby?" My parents exchanged another look. "There was an incident," my dad finally said. "She showed up at your daycare once, claiming to be your mother. Security stopped her before she got to you. After that, we moved here to somewhere more secluded, somewhere we thought would be safe. So why is she suddenly back now, and how does she know where we live?" "We don't know," my mom admitted. "We've had a restraining order against her for years, but those only work if the person respects legal boundaries. The police searched the woods in the surrounding area, but found no sign of the gray Honda or its driver. They put out an alert for her, based on the restraining order and my description. 2 officers stayed parked at the entrance to our trail that night. The next day, they came back with news. They'd found her car abandoned at a gas station about 20 miles away. There was no sign of Caroline, but they found something disturbing in the car. Dozens of photographs of me walking to and from school, taken over what looked like several weeks. There was also a detailed schedule of my daily routine and a map of our property. She'd been watching me for much longer than we realized, timing her appearances for when she knew I'd be walking alone. My parents didn't tell me everything the police found. I could tell from their guarded expressions and hushed conversations that they were shielding me from the worst of it. When I pressed for details about what Caroline wanted or what had happened to her, they would only say that the police were handling it, and I didn't need to worry. But I did worry. I still do. It's been 3 weeks now. The police never found Caroline, or if they did, my parents aren't telling me. I don't walk to school anymore. One of my parents always drives me. We've installed security cameras all around our property, and I'm not allowed to be home alone. The worst part is the not knowing. Not knowing if she's still out there somewhere, watching and waiting. Not knowing what she wanted from me or why she suddenly appeared after all these years. Not knowing if she'll come back. Sometimes at night I wake up thinking I hear someone calling my name in that same gentle, empty voice. I lie awake listening to every creak and rustle outside my window, wondering if it's just the woods or something more sinister. Every day I check the faces of strangers a little more carefully. Every unfamiliar car makes my heart race. Every time the doorbell rings unexpectedly, I freeze. Maybe one day I'll stop looking over my shoulder. Maybe one day my parents will tell me the whole truth about Caroline and what really happened all those years ago. Maybe one day I'll understand why her eyes looked so empty, yet so hungry when she called my name in the fog. But for now, I just keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't run that day, if I had answered when she called my name. I've been wanting to write this down for weeks, but couldn't bring myself to do it. Every time I tried, my hands would start shaking too badly to type. Even now, sitting in my new apartment with triple-checked locks and a security system, I'm looking over my shoulder every few minutes. So I worked at Fairway Fresh Foods on the edge of Clearwater. It's one of those medium-sized grocery stores, not a giant chain, but big enough to have several departments. I'd been there about 8 months, mostly evening shifts, because I'm not a morning person. The pay wasn't great, but my manager Dave was decent about letting me pick up extra hours when I needed them. My shifts typically ran from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., which meant I was almost always there for closing. By 9:30, the store would be pretty much empty, except for the occasional last-minute shopper grabbing milk or whatever. Most nights, I'd be on Register 3, the only one still open, while the other closers restocked or cleaned. That's when I first started noticing him. This guy would come in like clockwork, always between 9:40 and 9:50, just before we locked the doors. At first, I didn't think much of it. Some people work odd hours or just prefer shopping when it's quiet. But after a few weeks, I realized he was coming in 3 to 4 times every week, always right before close. He wasn't particularly memorable looking, maybe mid-30s, average height, brown hair that needed a trim. He always wore these faded jeans and plain t-shirts, sometimes with a navy windbreaker if it was cooler out. The only thing that stood out was how tired he always looked. Not just normal tired, but the kind of exhausted that makes someone look hollow. His shopping was weirdly consistent, too. A small basket with some combination of the same items: instant noodles, energy drinks, frozen burritos, bananas. Basic bachelor stuff, I figured. When he'd come to my register, he barely spoke beyond mumbling thanks or nodding when I asked if he found everything okay. Never used a rewards card, always paid with cash. I'm not usually the type to remember customers, but there was something off about this guy. Not scary, just odd, like he was always distracted by something more important. My coworker Jen called him Dead Eyes because he never seemed fully present. I mentioned him to Dave once, but he just shrugged and said, "As long as he pays and doesn't cause trouble, we don't care if he comes in every night." Looking back now, I wish I'd paid more attention to that weird feeling in my gut. So last Tuesday night started like any other closing shift. The store had been dead since about 8:30, and I was counting down the minutes until I could go home to my crappy little one-bedroom apartment and binge some Netflix. At 9:43, I remember checking the time. The door chimed, and there he was, right on schedule. He wandered through the aisles a bit longer than usual that night. I remember glancing at the clock a few times, wondering if he was going to cut it close to our 10 p.m. closing. When he finally came to my register at 9:56, he had his usual stuff plus a pack of batteries. "Find everything okay?" I asked automatically. He actually looked at me that night, which was different. His eyes seemed more focused than I'd ever seen them. "Yes. Thank you, Ellie." My stomach did this weird flip because I couldn't remember him ever speaking a full sentence to me before, let alone using my name. But then I remembered we all wear name tags, so it wasn't that weird. Still, something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable. I rang him up faster than usual, wanting him gone. His total came to $18.37, and he handed me a 20. When I gave him his change, his fingers lingered against my palm for just a second too long. I had to physically pull my hand back. "Have a good night," I said, already turning away to start shutting down my register. He didn't respond, just stood there for a moment before slowly walking toward the exit. I remember watching him go, noticing how he turned to look back at me right before the automatic doors closed behind him. Dave locked up while I finished counting my drawer. When everything balanced, I grabbed my purse from the break room locker and headed out the employee exit with Jen and Carlos, who were also closing that night. It was about 10:15 when we walked into the parking lot. The store sits at the back of a small strip mall with employee parking along the side. Carlos was talking about some movie he'd seen as we walked, but I wasn't really paying attention because I noticed something out of place. There was a car, a grayish sedan, nothing special, parked near the exit of the lot with its lights off, and standing next to it, just standing there, was the guy. Dead Eyes. He wasn't doing anything, just standing beside his car, staring at the store. "Isn't that the weird dude who always comes in late?" Jen whispered, noticing him too. I nodded, feeling suddenly exposed in the dim lot. "Probably just on his phone or something," Carlos said with a shrug, heading toward his truck. "See you guys tomorrow." Jen's car was parked near mine, so we walked together, both of us glancing over at the man. He never moved, never looked our way, just kept staring at the building. "That guy gives me the creeps," Jen said as she got into her car. "Text me when you get home, okay?" "Will do," I promised, unlocking my beat-up Honda. As I pulled out of my spot, I deliberately took the exit furthest from where the man was standing. In my rearview mirror, I could see him finally getting into his car, but his headlights didn't come on right away. The drive to my apartment only takes about 15 minutes. The whole way, I kept checking my mirrors, feeling jumpy for no real reason. Nothing seemed off, and by the time I pulled into my complex, I'd mostly convinced myself I was being paranoid. My apartment is in one of those boring 2-story buildings, 12 units total, mine's on the ground floor toward the back. The rent's cheap and the neighbors mostly keep to themselves, which is all I really cared about. That night, like most weeknights, the parking lot was quiet when I pulled in around 10:30. I texted Jen that I was home safe, then made myself a microwave dinner and scrolled through TikTok for a while. Normal night, nothing special. Around 1 a.m., I finally decided to call it quits and go to bed. I have this whole routine. Check the front door lock, check the sliding door to my tiny patio is secured with the bar, close my bedroom door most of the way but not completely. I don't like the sound of it latching while I'm trying to fall asleep. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, and climbed into bed. I remember scrolling through my phone one last time before setting it on the charger on my nightstand. Must have been about 1:15 when I finally turned off my lamp and closed my eyes. I don't know exactly how long I'd been asleep when something woke me up. At first I thought it was my phone ringing, that distinctive buzzing sound against the nightstand. I fumbled for it, disoriented and annoyed, but when I checked the screen, there were no missed calls or messages. The time showed 3:27 a.m. I was about to put it back down when I noticed headlights briefly illuminating my bedroom window before cutting off. My apartment faces the parking lot, so cars coming and going isn't unusual, but at this hour it caught my attention. I lay there for a moment, listening, trying to hear if someone was getting out of a car or walking past my unit. That's when I noticed my bedroom door. It was open about 6 inches. I froze, suddenly wide awake. My door is never open like that when I'm sleeping. Never. Like I said, I leave it barely cracked, maybe an inch at most. I stared at that gap, my heart starting to pound so hard I could feel it in my throat. Maybe I left it open wider than usual. Maybe the AC current pushed it. I tried to rationalize it, but a sick feeling was spreading through my stomach. I sat up slowly, straining to hear any sound in my apartment. It was completely silent except for the hum of my refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock in my kitchen. I reached over and turned on my lamp, half expecting someone to lunge at me the moment light filled the room. Nothing happened. My room looked normal. "Get it together, Ellie," I whispered to myself, trying to calm down. I decided to check the door. Maybe it wasn't latching properly. I climbed out of bed, crossing my room as quietly as possible. When I reached the door, I pushed it closed, then pulled it open again. The latch worked fine. Nothing wrong with it. Standing there in my pajama shorts and tank top, I suddenly felt incredibly vulnerable. I needed to check the rest of my apartment. If the door had just drifted open somehow, fine, but I had to be sure. I grabbed my phone, turned on its flashlight, and took a deep breath before stepping into the hallway. My apartment is tiny, just a short hall that opens to the combined living room-kitchen area with the bathroom across from my bedroom. I checked the bathroom first, pulling back the shower curtain with a shaking hand. Empty. The living room looked untouched. My laptop was still on the coffee table where I'd left it. My purse sat on the kitchen counter, seemingly undisturbed. I checked the front door, locked, with the chain still in place. The sliding glass door to the patio was still locked too, security bar in position. "You're being stupid," I told myself. "Everything's fine." But that sick feeling wouldn't go away. Something felt wrong, like when you walk into a room and know someone's been through your stuff. even though nothing looks obviously moved. I went back to my bedroom, telling myself I was overreacting. But as I crossed to the window to peek through the blinds at the parking lot, the feeling intensified. I parted the slats just enough to look out. There was a car in my assigned parking spot. Not my car. I'd parked in visitor parking because someone had taken my spot earlier. This was a different car, a grayish sedan. My blood went cold. I stepped back from the window, my mind racing. Could it be just a coincidence? Another visitor who happened to park there? But at 3:30 in the morning? I reached for my phone to call 911, but stopped myself. What would I say? That there's a car in my parking spot and my bedroom door was open wider than I remembered leaving it? They'd think I was crazy. I needed more proof before calling the police, proof that something was actually wrong. I turned slowly, scanning my bedroom more carefully this time. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance. My dresser, my nightstand, my closet with its sliding door slightly. The closet door was open about 2 inches. I never leave that door open at night. Never. I've always hated open closet doors. Childhood fear that never quite went away. As I stared at that narrow gap, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, I saw it. The faintest shift in the darkness within the closet, a slight movement, and then, unmistakable in the lamplight, an eye. A human eye, watching me through the crack in the door. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't move. For one horrible, endless second, I just stood there, locked in some twisted staring contest with whoever was hiding in my closet. Then survival instinct kicked in. I bolted, didn't grab anything, didn't look back. I ran straight for my front door, fumbling with the chain and deadbolt with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. I could hear movement behind me, footsteps rushing from my bedroom. But I didn't turn around. I finally got the door open and ran outside in my pajamas, no shoes, nothing. I sprinted to the nearest apartment with lights on, Unit 8, where I knew a middle-aged couple lived. I pounded on their door, screaming for help. The man who answered, I think his name is Bob or Bill, I'd only nodded hello to him before, looked terrified when he opened the door. I must have looked insane, barefoot and hyperventilating. "Someone's in my apartment," I managed to gasp. "Please call 911. His wife appeared behind him, already on the phone with emergency services. They pulled me inside and locked their door while we waited. It took the police 15 minutes to arrive, 15 minutes of me pacing their living room, jumping at every sound, convinced the man from my closet would somehow find me here too. When the officers finally knocked, Bob Bill checked through the peephole before letting them in. I told them everything. The customer from the store, the car in the parking lot, the closet. 2 officers went to check my apartment while another stayed with me to take my statement. They found the gray sedan still parked in my spot. The driver's door was open, but there was no one inside or anywhere around the car. My apartment door was wide open, but the intruder was gone. They took fingerprints and checked for evidence. Found shoe prints that weren't mine in my bedroom carpet. Found a phone charger that wasn't mine plugged into the outlet behind my nightstand. Found a small handwritten note in my closet that just said, Ellie, with a smiley face drawn next to it. The car was registered to the same man who'd been coming into my store. The police wouldn't tell me his name, but they confirmed he had a history of mental health issues and had been reported for similar behavior before. What keeps me up at night is thinking about what would have happened if his phone hadn't rung. The police think that's what it was, his phone ringing while he was hiding in my closet, the sound that woke me up. If not for that random call at 3:27 a.m., I might have slept through the night with him watching me. Or worse. They still haven't caught him. The police think he ran when I fled the apartment, disappearing into the wooded area behind my complex. They found evidence he'd been in my apartment before, hairs that weren't mine on my pillowcase, fingerprints on the inside of my bathroom cabinet. He'd been coming in while I was at work, learning my routine, waiting for the right time. I moved out that same day. I'm staying with my parents now, 2 hours away. I quit my job, changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, but I still feel watched. Still check my closet 3 times before I can sleep. Still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I hear a phone buzzing. I don't know why he chose me. Don't know what he wanted. Don't know if he's still out there looking for me. All I know is that when I close my eyes, I still see that eye watching me through the crack in the closet door, and I wonder how many nights he stood there, watching me sleep, before I finally caught him. I've never really told anyone about what happened at Lake Livingston except my therapist. It's like I locked it away in a box in my mind labeled "Do Not Open." But something about keeping it inside feels wrong now. Maybe writing it down will help me process it, or maybe it'll warn someone else. I don't know. I was 11 years old when my dad bought me that red four-wheeler. Man, I was so excited. We had this small cabin in Analaska, this tiny area on Lake Livingston in Texas, where we'd spend summers and some weekends. The four-wheeler meant freedom to me. Dad had some basic rules. Stay in the neighborhood, be home before dark, and always carry the walkie-talkie he gave me. Simple enough. That summer started like any other. Days spent on the lake, fishing with Dad, racing my four-wheeler down the dirt roads, and exploring every inch of our little peninsula. I felt so grown up being allowed to go off on my own. Dad would be back at the cabin working on something or other, and I'd be zooming around, my wild red hair flying behind me. I remember everything about that day in July, the sticky heat, the cicadas screaming in the trees, the smell of pine and lake water. I was wearing my favorite orange t-shirt with some dumb cartoon character on it, jean shorts, and these ratty sneakers I refused to throw away. I'd been riding for maybe an hour when I decided to stop at this spot overlooking the lake. It was this little clearing where you could see across the water to the other shore. I killed the engine and just sat there watching boats zip around. That's when the walkie-talkie crackled. "Mia, you there, sweetheart?" I figured it was Dad checking in, so I grabbed it from my backpack and answered. "Yeah, I'm here." "Where are you right now?" the voice asked. Something felt off. It sounded kind of like Dad, but not quite. I figured it was just the static. "I'm at the lookout point," I said. There was a pause. "The orange one by the water? I can see you from here." My stomach did this weird flip. Dad knew which lookout I meant. We'd been there together a million times. He wouldn't have asked like that. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice coming out all high and weird. "Don't you recognize me? I'm watching you right now. Orange shirt, right? And that pretty red hair." Ice shot through my veins. I scanned the shoreline, the trees, the water. I couldn't see anyone, but someone could see me. "I like your red four-wheeler too," the voice continued. "Bet it goes real fast." My hand was shaking so bad I could barely hold the walkie-talkie. "My dad's coming to meet me right now," I lied, trying to sound brave. The man laughed. It was this low, horrible sound that made my skin crawl. "No, he's not. He's back at the cabin. I've been watching you for weeks, Mia. I know your routine." I started the engine, my fingers fumbling with the key. "Don't go yet," the voice said quickly. "Look out at the lake. See that blue boat? I'm waving at you." Against my better judgment, I looked. There was a blue boat maybe 100 yards offshore. Someone was standing in it, arm raised. "I've got candy on my boat, and a puppy. Why don't you ride down to the dock and I'll pick you up? We can go for a ride." That was it. I dropped the walkie-talkie, gunned the engine, and tore out of there as fast as that four-wheeler would go. I kept looking back, terrified I'd see someone chasing me. The whole ride home, I kept hearing that voice in my head. "I've been watching you for weeks." I skidded into our driveway, jumped off before the engine was even off, and ran inside screaming for my dad. I was crying so hard I could barely get the words out. Dad called the local sheriff immediately, but by the time they checked the boat launch, nobody was there. They found my walkie-talkie at the lookout point. Dad's face went white when the deputy told him they'd checked the frequency and found it was the same channel as ours. Someone had been monitoring our conversations, learning our patterns. For the rest of that summer, I wasn't allowed outside alone. The four-wheeler stayed locked in the shed. I had nightmares about that voice, about boats coming to get me. Dad installed better locks, bought a guard dog, and even talked about selling the cabin. But then my parents started fighting more, and the cabin became the least of their problems. They divorced when I was 16. Mom moved to Houston with her new boyfriend, and I stayed with Dad. Money got tight, so I picked up this job at the gas station just outside Analaska to help out. It was mostly boring, ringing up cigarettes and beer for locals, cleaning the bathrooms, stocking shelves. But it paid, and Dad needed the help with bills. That's where I met him, the deputy. He came in almost every night during my shifts. At first it seemed normal, a cop grabbing coffee during his patrol. He was older, maybe mid-30s, with this permanent smirk that never reached his eyes. He'd make small talk while I rang him up. Nothing weird, just chit-chat about the weather or local gossip. Then he started lingering, asking more personal questions. Where did I go to school? Did I have a boyfriend? What time did I get off work? What days was I working next week? Each time, staying a little longer, getting a little closer to the counter. I told my manager it made me uncomfortable, but he just shrugged it off. "He's a sheriff's deputy, Mia. What, tell him to shop somewhere else?" One night, about 3 months after I started, I was alone in the store. It was almost closing time, that dead period where nobody comes in except maybe someone needing gas. The bell over the door jingled, and there he was. No uniform this time, just regular clothes. "Hey there, Miss Mia," he said, walking up to the counter. "Quiet night." I nodded, trying to look busy with restocking the cigarette display behind me. "You know," he said, leaning against the counter, "I've been thinking about you." I froze, my back to him, candy bars clutched in my hand. "Turn around when I'm talking to you," he said, his voice different now, harder. I turned slowly, keeping the counter between us. "You're a real pretty girl, Mia, real pretty red hair. Reminds me of someone I used to know." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Something about the way he was looking at me, like he was hungry, made my skin crawl. "I'm closing up soon," I managed to say. "Is there something you need to buy?" He smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. "I think you know what I need." Before I could react, he reached across the counter and grabbed my wrist. His grip was like iron. "Tell me you love me," he whispered. "What?" I tried to pull away, but he just squeezed harder. "Say it. Say I love you, Ryan." His eyes were all wrong, flat and empty like a doll's. "Please let go," I whispered, tears starting to form. "You're hurting me." His grip tightened until I thought my bones would break. "Say it, or I'll show you what hurting really means." "I love you, Ryan," I choked out, hating myself, hating him. He released my wrist and stepped back, smoothing his shirt like nothing had happened. "That's a good girl. I'll see you tomorrow night." As soon as he left, I locked the door, ran to the bathroom, and threw up. My wrist had 5 perfect bruises where his fingers had been. I called my dad sobbing, and he came to pick me up. I quit that night. A week later, I started seeing this counselor in the next town over. I didn't tell her everything at first, just about the creepy deputy. She listened quietly, taking notes. Then she asked me where exactly our cabin was. Analaska area, I said. On Lake Livingston. She put her pen down and looked at me for a long time. Mia, she said finally, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be difficult to hear. What she told me next made everything click into place in the worst possible way. Analaska had a history, a dark one that locals didn't discuss. For decades, there had been whispers about pedophile rings operating in the area, children who went missing, families who moved away suddenly without explanation. Reports filed that mysteriously disappeared. The worst part, she said, her voice low, is that it involves local law enforcement, always has. That's why nothing ever changes. That's why victims disappear or stay silent. I felt sick as she continued. Entire families are involved. Generations. They protect each other. They use their positions, police, teachers, business owners, to find vulnerable children and cover for each other. My mind flashed back to that voice on the walkie-talkie, to the deputy's eyes as he forced me to say I loved him, to the way he mentioned my red hair, reminded him of someone. The man on the walkie-talkie, I whispered. He knew too much about me, about my routine. She nodded grimly. And the deputy, was his last name Welker by any chance? I felt the blood drain from my face. Yes, Ryan Welker. His father was investigated back in the 90s for similar behaviors. Nothing ever came of it. Evidence vanished, witnesses recanted. The usual pattern. I couldn't breathe. All these years I'd thought they were separate incidents, the walkie-talkie creep, the handsy deputy. But they weren't. They were connected by something bigger and darker than I could have imagined. My counselor helped me file a report with the state police instead of the local sheriff. Nothing came of it, of course. Welker denied everything, and without proof, it was my word against his. The gas station security cameras had malfunctioned that night. How convenient. Dad sold the cabin last year. Neither of us has been back to Analaska since. Sometimes I still dream about that voice on the walkie-talkie, but now in my dreams, it has Deputy Welker's face. I don't know how many kids they've hurt over the years. I don't know if they're still operating or if they've just gotten better at hiding it. All I know is that Livingston holds no happy memories for me anymore. Just the knowledge that I narrowly escaped becoming another statistic, another victim who disappears without a trace. And sometimes, when my phone rings and there's no one on the other end, I wonder if they're still watching me, waiting for me to come back to that lake. But I never will. Some places you just can't go home to. I never thought I'd be writing this. Even now, 5 years later, my hands are shaking as I type. I guess I need to get this off my chest, and maybe it'll help someone else recognize the warning signs before things go as far as they did with me. It started so stupid and simple. February 2018, I had just turned 21. Bobby, my husband at the time, and I were living in this little ranch house in Elmhurst, just outside Chicago, with our friend Nick, who was helping with rent. One morning, I went out to my car to go to work and immediately knew something was wrong. The passenger door wasn't fully closed. I remember standing there in the driveway, the February wind cutting through my jacket, just staring at that door. I don't know why. but I had this sudden feeling of dread wash over me. When I opened the door, my purse was gone. I'd stupidly left it under the seat the night before when Bobby and I came back from dinner. I called the police, filed a report, canceled my credit cards. The officer who came just shrugged and said, "Car break-ins happen all the time in this area. Don't leave valuables in your car." Basic stuff, right? Nothing special. I wasn't even that upset, just annoyed at myself for being careless. My purse had my license, some cash, credit cards, and my social security card. I know. Stupid mistake that would haunt me for years. About a week later, we woke up to our house egged. Yellow slime dripping down our front door and windows. Bobby was pissed, thought it was just neighborhood kids. We cleaned it up and moved on. Then came the flat tires. First mine, then Bobby's, then Nick's, all within the same week. Each time, it was a clean puncture. No nail, no screw, just a deliberate hole. The mechanic said someone definitely did it on purpose. But the moment I realized this wasn't random came a month after the purse theft. I got a call from the Elmhurst Police Department saying they had detained someone who had my ID. The officer said, "Ma'am, do you know a Craig J?" I didn't. Never heard that name in my life. The officer explained that this guy, Craig, had been pulled over for running a stop sign, and when asked for identification, he'd handed over my driver's license. When questioned, he told the officer I was his girlfriend, and he was holding it for me. They arrested him for possession of stolen property, but released him on bail within 24 hours. I felt sick, not just because some stranger had my ID, but because he was claiming to know me, to be in a relationship with me. The police showed me his mugshot, a guy maybe in his late 20s, thin with dark hair and these intense eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. I'd never seen him before in my life. That's when everything escalated. First came the social media messages. Friend requests from fake accounts with weird names. Messages asking why I was ignoring our love. Then emails to my personal account that I never gave out publicly. One night in April, Bobby was working late and Nick was out with friends. My friend Lauren came over to hang out, and around 11 p.m. we heard the back door handle jiggling. Not just once, but persistently, like someone was testing it. Then footsteps on our back deck. Lauren and I froze, staring at each other in the kitchen. The motion lights came on, and through the kitchen window, I caught a glimpse of someone ducking down below the deck railing. We called the police. By the time they arrived, whoever it was had disappeared. The officers found footprints in the muddy garden beneath my bedroom window and said it looked like someone had been standing there for a while. I couldn't sleep for days after that. Bobby installed security cameras, but they kept getting turned around or covered up. We'd check the footage and find hours where the cameras were just facing the wall or sky. Someone was on our property regularly, touching our security equipment, and we never caught them in the act. In June, our friend Sean was staying over after a late movie night. Around 3 a.m., he woke up to the sound of his bedroom window sliding open. He thought it was the wind until he saw fingers curling around the window frame. Sean yelled, and the person fell backward off whatever they were standing on. Sean ran to the window and saw a man sprinting across our backyard. This time we got lucky. The guy tripped over our garden hose and face-planted hard enough that he was dazed when the police arrived. It was Craig, the same guy who had my ID. The police arrested him for attempted breaking and entering. During questioning, Craig told the police that he and I had a secret relationship that I was hiding from Bobby. He knew details about my life, where I worked, my parents' names, even the classes I was taking at community college. Details he could only have gotten by watching me, following me, or searching through my personal information. We got a restraining order. Craig spent 60 days in jail for violating it almost immediately after release. During that time, I started noticing financial problems. My credit score was tanking. There were accounts opened in my name. The IRS sent letters about tax returns I never filed. My Social Security number was being used everywhere. I spent hours on the phone with credit bureaus, filing police reports for identity theft, but the damage was severe. The stress took a toll on my marriage. Bobby and I were fighting constantly. He blamed me for not being more careful with my purse, for somehow attracting this stalker. By early 2019, we were separated, and I moved into a small apartment in Villa Park with a roommate. I thought moving would help. New place, no address linked to my name on any paperwork. My roommate Jen had the lease. I even changed jobs, switching from the dental office where I'd worked to a new one further away. 3 weeks after moving, I walked out of work to find my car window smashed and a bouquet of dead flowers on my driver's seat with a note, "You can't hide from true love." The next day, Craig showed up at my sister's house. He'd somehow found her address and told her he was concerned because I wasn't returning his calls. My sister had never met him, but knew about the situation and called the police. He was gone before they arrived. A week later, my cousin Mark saw someone following him from his workplace. It was Craig, who approached him in the parking lot asking questions about me, where I was living, if I was seeing anyone. Mark told him to get lost and called me immediately. Then came the worst night. I was home alone. Jen was visiting her parents for the weekend. Around midnight, I heard a noise in the kitchen. Thinking it was just the building settling, I tried to ignore it. But then I heard cabinet doors opening and closing softly. I called 911 with shaking hands, whispering my address. The dispatcher told me to lock my bedroom door and stay on the line. I could hear footsteps moving through the apartment, getting closer to my room. I hid in my closet, hand over my mouth, trying not to make a sound. The police arrived within minutes, but when they searched the apartment, they found nothing. Just some open cabinets in the kitchen and my bathroom door ajar when I knew I'd left it closed. They suggested maybe I was being paranoid given my history and left after checking all the locks. The next morning, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, knocked on my door. She told me she'd gotten up around 3 a.m. to take her medication and had seen a man leaving my apartment through the patio door. She described Craig perfectly. He'd been in my apartment the whole time the police were there, hiding somewhere they hadn't checked. 2 days later, Jen came home early from her parents and found Craig hiding in our pantry. He'd been there for God knows how long. Jen screamed and he bolted, but not before neighbors in the hallway saw him. This time, there were multiple witnesses. The police found him at his parents' house. He had a backpack with him containing several pairs of my underwear, pictures of me printed from my private Instagram account, and a journal detailing his relationship with me. Pages and pages of delusional writing about our future together. This time, Craig was charged with aggravated stalking, breaking and entering, and violation of the restraining order. During the court proceedings, his parents testified that Craig had been diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder years before and had stopped taking his medication around the time he stole my purse. According to them, when unmedicated, he would become fixated on people and develop elaborate fantasies about relationships with them. He was sentenced to 3 years, but served just under 2 with psychiatric treatment. I moved again during this time, changed my phone number, deleted all social media, and legally changed my last name after getting remarried to my current husband, who has been incredibly supportive through all of this. The financial damage took even longer to fix. My credit was destroyed. I had collection agencies calling about loans I never took out. The IRS was after me for taxes on income I never earned. It took nearly 4 years and thousands of dollars in legal fees to sort through the identity theft. I'm still dealing with some of the fallout. Craig was released last year. Despite everything, he's found ways to contact me. New social media accounts trying to friend my husband. Emails to my workplace from different addresses. Letters sent to my parents' house. The restraining order is still in effect, and his parole officer has been notified each time, but it never seems to stop him completely. I've developed severe anxiety. I check the locks multiple times every night. I park under streetlights and check my back seat before getting in my car. I've had 3 different phone numbers in 5 years. I keep the blinds closed, always. What scares me most isn't just that he won't stop. It's that one piece of carelessness on my part, leaving my purse in the car that night, gave someone the tools to completely dismantle my life. My Social Security number can never be changed unless I'm in a federal protection program. My identity will always be compromised. And somewhere out there, Craig is still convinced we have a relationship, still writing in journals about our love, still planning for the day we'll be together. I've moved again recently, and no one knows my address except my husband and my parents. I dye my hair regularly and wear sunglasses even on cloudy days. I've become someone else, someone always looking over her shoulder, someone who flinches at unexpected knocks on the door. The police say they're doing everything they can, but I know the truth. Until Craig does something truly violent, this will just continue. And I live every day wondering if today's the day he escalates beyond watching, beyond stealing, beyond breaking in. Because people like this don't just go away. They wait. They plan. They convince themselves that next time will be different. I heard from his cousin through a mutual friend that Craig has my picture as his phone wallpaper. A picture taken from inside my old apartment that I never posted anywhere. I don't know when he took it or how many times he was in my space without me knowing. Just last week, a delivery man brought flowers to my office. No card. When I called the florist, they said the order was placed online, paid with a prepaid credit card. The message was supposed to read, "Forever yours, no matter where you hide." I'm writing this from yet another new apartment, on yet another new laptop, wondering how long until I have to run again. This isn't a life. It's a series of escapes, a constant state of fear, all because I forgot to lock my car one night 5 years ago. This all happened back in the mid-1980s in Salt Lake City. We lived in a nice neighborhood on the east side. Nothing fancy, just a regular suburban place with decent-sized yards and that classic 70s architecture. I was 8 years old when the new family moved in next door. The first thing everyone noticed was how many of them there were. My mom counted at least 12 kids ranging from teenagers down to babies, though it was honestly hard to keep track. There seemed to be multiple women in the house too, but only one man, their father. He was tall with a beard and always wore these pressed shirts buttoned all the way up, even in the summer heat. My sister Kate was 10, and we first met some of the younger kids when they literally climbed over our fence one afternoon. We were playing in our sandbox when suddenly 3 of them just appeared, 2 girls around my age and a boy a bit younger. They didn't act like it was weird at all, just asked if they could play with us. I remember their names perfectly, Sarah, Hannah, and Joseph. They were really sweet, but kind of awkward. They didn't know a lot of the games we played, and they spoke in this super polite way that reminded me of old-fashioned books. but they learned quick and seemed thrilled about our swing set. That first day, they only stayed about 20 minutes before a woman's voice called from over the fence, "Children, return home immediately." They scrambled up and over that fence so fast it was like they were terrified of being late. The middle girl, Hannah, whispered, "We have to go right away when Mother calls or we'll be in trouble." Over the next few weeks, different kids from their family would appear in our yard. Sometimes the same ones, sometimes new faces. They always came over the fence rather than through the gate, which I thought was weird. But when I asked them about it, Sarah just said, "Father doesn't want us going through gates to other people's houses." My mom was pretty chill about it. She just made sure we played where she could see us from the kitchen window. One hot day in July, we'd been playing tag for about an hour when Mom came out with paper plates of apple slices and cheese cubes. Nothing special, just a basic snack. The neighbor kids stared at it like it was Christmas morning. "Is this for us too?" Sarah asked in this tiny voice. Mom laughed and said, "Of course, everyone gets a snack." They hesitated, and Hannah actually looked over her shoulder toward their house before taking a plate. They ate so fast, and Joseph asked if he could take some home for their other siblings. Mom said no, but they could come over for snacks any time. That evening, while we were having dinner, someone pounded on our front door so hard the windows rattled. My dad went to answer it, and I snuck into the hallway to peek. It was their father, and he was furious. I'd never seen an adult so angry. "You had no right to feed my children," he shouted. "No right. Their diet is specifically planned according to our beliefs. You've undermined my authority and contaminated them with worldly food." My dad tried to calm him down, saying it was just apples and cheese, but the man kept ranting about Gentile influence and corruption of youth. I didn't understand most of it then, but the pure rage in his voice terrified me. Mom came and pulled me back to the dining room, but I could still hear him threatening to call the police if we ever fed his kids again. After that night, the fence between our houses got repaired. All the loose boards replaced, and it was built higher. We didn't see the kids for about 2 weeks. When they finally appeared again, they stayed on their side, talking to us through gaps in the fence. Sarah told me they weren't allowed in our yard anymore. "Father says your family doesn't respect our ways," she explained. She seemed so sad about it. As summer turned to fall, I noticed changes in how they dressed. The girls who used to wear regular t-shirts and shorts started wearing these long, prairie-style dresses with long sleeves even in the hot weather. The boys switched to button-up shirts all the time. Their hair changed too. The girls' hair got longer, always in these braided styles, while the boys had these precise short cuts. The weirdest part was how different women would call them home. It wasn't just one mom anymore. There'd be different women, all wearing similar homemade dresses with their hair in the same style. They all called the kids the same way, like they all had authority over them. Sometimes they'd call the girls sister, even though they were clearly adults talking to children. One day in late fall, I was doing homework in my room when I heard a familiar whisper through my open window. It was Hannah, standing in their backyard near the fence. I ran down to talk to her. "We're leaving soon," she told me through a knothole. "Father says we're going to a special ranch in Arizona where we can live our true faith." "When are you coming back?" I asked. "We're not," she said simply. "It's our new home. Father says it's where God wants his chosen people to prepare for the end times." I didn't understand what that meant, but I felt sad. I ran back inside and grabbed a friendship bracelet I'd made in school. When I came back and tried to pass it through the fence, Hannah looked terrified. "I can't take that," she whispered. "We're not allowed worldly adornments." Sister Mercy says jewelry is vanity that leads to wickedness. Before I could say anything else, two older women in matching quilted house dresses appeared in their yard. They didn't say anything to me, just stared until Hannah backed away from the fence. One of them put her hand on Hannah's shoulder and squeezed until Hannah winced. "Come inside now," the woman said. "Remember what your father said about speaking to outsiders." The next weekend, a huge moving truck came, and they were gone. I never got to say goodbye properly. My parents seemed relieved they'd left, but I missed having kids next door to play with. Life went on. I grew up, went to college, moved away from Utah. I mostly forgot about that family until 2008 when the news broke about the YFZ ranch raid in Texas. I was living in Seattle by then, watching the coverage of all those women and children being removed from the compound. The moment I saw those distinctive prairie dresses and hairstyles, something clicked. Those were exactly like what our neighbors had started wearing before they left. I called my mom that night and asked if she thought our old neighbors had been part of that same group. "Oh, honey," she sighed, "we always suspected they were with one of those fundamentalist sects. Your father did some digging after they left. The man next door had at least 3 wives that we could tell. Those women calling the children, all married to him." I was shocked. "But why didn't you say anything to anyone?" "Back then, people looked the other way more with those groups," she explained. "And honestly, we were just relieved when they moved. Your father was afraid they might try to take you girls if we made trouble for them." That comment gave me chills. I remembered how intensely they'd watched us, how the father had exploded over something as innocent as apple slices. 3 years later, in 2011, my mom called me out of the blue. Her voice sounded strange, hesitant. "Remember those children next door, the ones you used to play with?" "Of course," I said. "I just saw something in the paper. One of the girls, she would be in her 30s now. She died last week. She was trying to escape from a compound in Arizona, running away from her husband. They found her about 5 miles from the property." My stomach dropped. Which one was it? Sarah? Hannah? They didn't give her birth name in the article, just her married name. She was apparently the 5th wife of some elder in the group. I pressed for more details, but Mom refused to share them. She just said it was too awful and that she wished she hadn't brought it up. But I couldn't let it go. I spent weeks searching online for news about FLDS women dying while trying to escape. There were several cases that fit the timeline, but with so little information, I couldn't tell if any of them were the girls I knew. Sometimes I look at those old pictures of the raid and scan the faces, wondering if any of those children were the other kids from next door. I wonder what happened to Joseph, to the baby siblings I barely glimpsed. I wonder if Hannah and Sarah are still alive, still trapped in that life. What haunts me most is how normal everything seemed at first. Just kids wanting to play, just a family moving in next door. But there were signs everywhere. The odd rules, the fear in their eyes when they took food from us, the way they flinched when the women appeared. I was too young to understand what I was seeing. By the time I was old enough to recognize it for what it was, they were long gone. Sometimes I feel guilty for not somehow helping them, though I don't know what an 8-year-old could have done. I still have that friendship bracelet I tried to give Hannah. I keep it in my jewelry box as a reminder that sometimes the scariest things happen right in front of us, hiding in plain sight behind normal-looking fences in regular neighborhoods. And I wonder how many other kids are out there right now, looking through knotholes, wishing someone would notice what's happening to them before they disappear. I don't usually post stuff like this. I'm not really the type to share personal details online, but I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone here has dealt with something similar. This whole nightmare started about 8 months ago. I was working at this marketing firm downtown, nothing special, just a regular 9 to 5 that paid the bills. Every morning, I'd catch the 7:15 bus from the station near my apartment, transfer to the Blue Line train at Central Station, and be at my desk by 8:30. Same routine, day in and day out. I first noticed him on a Tuesday morning. There was nothing special about that day, just another gray morning in early spring, still cold enough that I was bundled up in my winter coat. I was standing at my usual spot at the bus shelter, scrolling through emails on my phone, when I got this weird feeling. You know that sensation when someone's watching you, like a prickling on the back of your neck? I glanced up and saw this guy leaning against the opposite side of the shelter, average height, probably in his 30s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Nothing remarkable about him, really, except for the way he was staring, not just looking in my general direction, but full-on staring, completely focused on me. When our eyes met, he didn't look away like a normal person would. He just kept staring. I did what most women would do, looked back down at my phone and tried to ignore him. Maybe he was just zoning out, I told myself. We all get lost in our thoughts sometimes, right? But then I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, and in my peripheral vision, I saw him do the exact same thing. I coughed, and a second later, he coughed too. I tucked my hair behind my ear, and he raised his hand to his ear in the same way. By this point, my heart was racing. I was desperately hoping the bus would arrive soon. When it finally did, I got on and found a seat in the middle, hoping he wasn't going the same way. But of course, he was. He sat a few rows ahead where he could turn and glance at me, which he did, repeatedly, during the 15-minute ride. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he just happened to have the same commute. The city isn't that big. People run into each other on public transit all the time. The next day, I purposely left my apartment 5 minutes earlier than usual. And there he was again, already at the bus shelter when I arrived. This time, he was doing these weird stretches, touching his toes, rolling his shoulders, but always positioned so he was facing me. It was like he was performing, making sure I could see him. I started noticing a pattern. He'd always be at the station before me, no matter what time I arrived. If I was 10 minutes early, he was already there. If I was running late, he was still there, like he'd been waiting. He'd take the same bus, transfer to the same train. Sometimes he'd sit near me, sometimes not, but he was always watching. About a month into this, I decided to try a slightly different route. Instead of my usual bus, I walked 2 blocks over to catch a different line that would still get me to the same train station. I felt relieved that morning, thinking I'd outsmarted him. I hadn't. He was there at the transfer station, sitting on a bench. When I walked up, he stood, stretched his arms overhead, making sure I saw him, and then followed me onto the train. That day, he sat directly across from me, staring the entire 20-minute ride. I was trapped, surrounded by other commuters who had no idea what was happening. I texted my roommate, pretending to be engaged in conversation so I wouldn't have to acknowledge him. By this point, I was terrified. I started taking pictures of him with my phone, trying to be discreet. I thought about reporting him, but what would I say? This guy takes the same bus as me and stares. I hadn't caught him doing anything explicitly threatening. He hadn't spoken to me or tried to touch me. He was just there, always there, watching. One particularly bad morning, I got on the bus and sat in a window seat. He got on after me and sat directly behind me. I could feel him leaning forward, so close I swear I could feel his breath on my neck. I got up and moved seats, and when I looked back, he was staring at me with this strange half-smile. Not angry that I'd moved, almost amused. Like this was a game to him. I started varying my schedule drastically. Some days I'd leave 30 minutes early, some days I'd get a ride from my roommate, anything to break the pattern. But no matter what I did, at some point during my commute, he'd appear. It was like he had nowhere else to be, like his entire day was structured around intercepting me. The worst part came in May, when I lost my job due to company downsizing. I was devastated, of course, but there was this tiny silver lining. I wouldn't have to deal with my stalker anymore. For 2 weeks, I didn't take that bus route at all. I focused on job hunting from home and trying to get my anxiety under control. Then one afternoon, I needed to go to the mall for new interview clothes. The mall was along my old commute route, but I deliberately went at 2 p.m., nowhere near my usual morning or evening commute times. I figured there was no way he'd be there at a random time on a weekday. I was wrong. I was coming out of a store, arms full of shopping bags, when I saw him. He was sitting on a bench near the mall's bus stop, staring right at me. My blood went cold. There was no way this was a coincidence. He must have been spending hours every day just hovering around places I might go, waiting for me to appear. How else could he have known I'd be there at that specific time? I ducked back into the store, hands shaking so badly I dropped one of my bags. The saleswoman must have seen the panic on my face because she asked if I needed help. I stammered something about seeing someone I was trying to avoid. She let me leave through their back service entrance, which connected to the parking garage. I called my roommate in tears, and she drove to pick me up. While I waited, hidden between parked cars, I kept thinking about what had just happened. He wasn't just following my predictable work schedule anymore. He was actively searching for me at different times and places. The level of dedication was terrifying. Did he know where I lived? Was he watching my apartment too? That night, I finally filed a police report. The officer was sympathetic but not particularly helpful. Without any direct threats or contact, there wasn't much they could do except make a note of it. They suggested I keep documenting his appearances and to call immediately if he ever approached me directly. I felt so helpless. I changed my routine completely after that. I stopped using public transportation altogether, unless absolutely necessary. I got rides from friends, started ordering groceries online, and even moved my job search to focus on remote positions. My whole life had to change because of this man who wouldn't leave me alone. The final straw came about a month ago. I found out I'm pregnant, unplanned, but that's another story entirely. My first prenatal appointment was at a clinic downtown, and I had no choice but to take the bus. I hadn't been on that route in nearly 3 months, and I hoped, prayed, that he'd given up by now. I should have known better. As the bus pulled up to my stop, I saw him through the window, standing at the shelter. The same dark jacket, the same intense stare. I stayed on the bus, riding past my stop, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. I ended up missing my appointment. I called the clinic in tears, explaining I couldn't make it, without telling them why. They rescheduled me for the following week, and I had my roommate drive me. That was 6 weeks ago. I haven't seen him since, but only because I've completely altered my life to avoid any chance of running into him. I've taken a work-from-home job that pays less than what I was making before. I barely leave my apartment except to go places far from my old roots. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, scanning every crowd for his face. The pregnancy should be a happy time, but I'm consumed with fear. What happens when the baby comes and I have to take them to doctor appointments? Will he still be out there waiting? What if he follows me to my new apartment when I move next month? How long will this go on? What bothers me the most is that I still don't understand why me. I'm not particularly attractive or unusual. I never spoke to him or made eye contact with him before he started this. I was just a random woman waiting for a bus, and somehow I became the focus of this terrifying obsession. The most chilling part is the dedication. The fact that he would stand at that bus station for who knows how long, just waiting for me to show up. Would spend his days moving between points on my commute route on the chance he might see me. Who does that? What kind of person has nothing better to do than to terrorize a stranger? I've considered moving to another city, but I don't have the money for that, especially now with the baby coming. My family is here. My doctor is here. I'm trapped in this weird limbo of fear. Sometimes I wonder if I'm overreacting. Maybe he's just a socially awkward guy who happened to find me attractive and didn't know how to approach me normally. But then I remember the mall. The way he was just sitting there in the middle of a random afternoon, like he had been waiting for hours on the off chance I might appear. The half smile when I moved seats on the bus. The deliberate way he would position himself to be seen. No, this wasn't a coincidence or a misunderstanding. This was calculated. This was someone who decided to make me the center of his life in the most terrifying way possible. And the worst part is, I still don't know who he is, where he lives, or if he's still out there, watching and waiting. Every time someone knocks on my door, every time my phone rings with an unknown number, every time I hear footsteps behind me in a parking lot, I wonder, is it him? Has he finally decided to do more than just watch? I'm trying to be strong for the baby, but honestly, I've never felt more vulnerable in my life. I check the locks on my doors and windows multiple times before bed. I've started sleeping with my phone in my hand. I don't know how long I can live like this. Has anyone else dealt with something similar? Did it ever stop? I need to know there's an end to this, that someday I can just be a normal person again who doesn't jump at shadows or scan every crowd for that familiar face. I need to know my baby will be safe. I'm still shaking as I write this. It's been 5 days, and I can't stop replaying everything in my mind. I need to get this out somehow, so here goes. I live in Seattle and take the 42 bus home from my office downtown every weekday. It's about a 35-minute ride to my neighborhood, and I usually spend it reading to decompress after work. Last Thursday started like any other day. Nothing special or different to warn me about what was coming. I work at an insurance company, been there for almost 12 years now. I'm 40, divorced, no kids, just me and my cat Milo. That evening I left work around 6:15, grabbed my usual coffee from the place on the corner. Even though it was late, I've never had trouble sleeping, and walked to my bus stop on 3rd Avenue. The bus was crowded as usual for that time. I found a seat about halfway back, right side, next to the window. I pulled out my book, the new Ruth Ware thriller I'd been dying to finish, and settled in for the ride. The seat next to me was taken by an older woman with grocery bags. I remember noticing her perfume was really strong, like those department store samples that give you a headache. About 10 minutes into the ride, the woman with groceries got off, and someone else sat down. I didn't look up. I was at a good part in my book. The bus was hot and stuffy, typical for February when they crank the heat too high. I remember taking off my scarf and stuffing it in my purse. That's when I felt it for the first time, this light touch on my hair. It was so subtle I thought maybe it was just the air from the vents above. My hair's long, past my shoulders, and I had it down that day. I ignored it and kept reading. A few minutes later, I felt it again, like someone was barely touching the ends of my hair. I shifted a little closer to the window, thinking maybe the person next to me was accidentally brushing against me. I still didn't look up. The third time, there was no mistaking it. Someone was definitely touching my hair, letting it slide through their fingers. I turned my head slightly, not wanting to make a scene, and saw from the corner of my eye it was a man sitting next to me now. I could smell him, this mix of unwashed clothes and something sickly sweet, like cheap cologne trying to cover body odor. I moved even closer to the window, practically pressing myself against it, and kept reading. My heart started beating faster, but I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe my hair had fallen over the seat divider. Then I felt a distinct tug, not hard, but deliberate, like someone wrapping my hair around their finger and pulling slightly. I whipped my head around and directly looked at him for the first time. Mid-30s maybe, dark stubble, greasy-looking brown hair pushed back from his forehead. He was wearing a gray sweatshirt with stains down the front and jeans that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. His hands were dirty, fingernails black with grime. The worst part was his eyes. They were empty, like looking at a mannequin. No emotion, no embarrassment at being caught, nothing. "Stop touching my hair," I said firmly but quietly. I didn't want to cause a scene. He just stared at me with those dead eyes and smiled slightly. Not a normal smile, just his lips stretching without reaching his eyes. He didn't say anything. I turned back to my book, but I wasn't reading anymore. My hands were shaking. I was hyper-aware of his presence beside me, how his leg was now pressing against mine despite there being plenty of room on the seat. I could feel his eyes on me. My stop was still about 15 minutes away. I was debating whether to get up and move when I felt his hand in my hair again. This time, there was no mistaking his intention. He gathered a chunk of my hair in his fist and tugged it, hard enough that my head jerked back slightly. Something snapped in me. I don't know if it was fear or rage or just pure survival instinct, but I dropped my book, spun in my seat, and grabbed his wrist in midair as he was reaching for my hair again. "I told you to stop," I hissed. His expression changed then, surprise, then this twisted smile, like he was enjoying my reaction, like this was exactly what he wanted. He tried to pull his hand away, but I held on tight. I've been doing CrossFit for the past 3 years, and grip strength was something my trainer always emphasized. He clearly wasn't expecting that. "Let go, bitch," he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. Instead, I squeezed harder and twisted. I don't know what came over me. I've never been in a physical confrontation in my life, but in that moment, all I could think was that I had to stop this man from touching me ever again. There was a sickening crack, and he let out this strangled yelp that finally got the attention of other passengers. I realized I'd broken his fingers. I could feel them give way under my grip. I was as shocked as he was. I let go immediately and stood up. My book fell to the floor. My hands were trembling violently. "He kept grabbing my hair," I said loudly, to everyone and no one. "He wouldn't stop touching me." The man was cradling his hand, his face contorted with pain and rage. "You crazy fucking bitch," he shouted. "You broke my fingers." The bus driver had heard the commotion and pulled over to the curb. He came back to where we were standing. "What's going on?" he demanded. Everyone started talking at once. An older man sitting across from us said, That guy was touching her hair. I saw him do it multiple times. She asked him to stop. A woman behind us chimed in. I saw it too. He was being creepy as hell. The bus driver made a quick decision. Both of you, off the bus now. I'm calling the police. My stomach dropped. Police? Would I be arrested for breaking his fingers? I'd never even had a parking ticket before. We were made to stand outside the bus while the driver called 911. The man kept glaring at me, holding his injured hand close to his chest. I stood as far away from him as possible, trying not to show how terrified I was. A few passengers had gotten off too, standing near me like protective bodyguards. I was grateful for that. The police arrived within minutes, 2 patrol cars with lights flashing. One officer approached me while his partner went to the man. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" the officer asked. His name tag said Rodriguez. I explained everything, my voice shaking, how the man had repeatedly touched my hair after I asked him to stop, how he'd yanked it hard, how I'd grabbed his hand and hurt him. "I didn't mean to break his fingers," I said. "I just wanted him to stop." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "Wait here a moment." He went to confer with his partner who was talking to the man. I could see them looking at his hand. The bus driver was showing them the surveillance footage on a small screen near his seat. After what felt like forever, Officer Rodriguez came back. "We're going to need statements from both of you. Would you mind coming down to the station?" I nodded, feeling sick. The other officer was now handcuffing the man, despite his injured hand. That surprised me. They put us in separate patrol cars. As we drove to the station, Officer Rodriguez tried to put me at ease. "You're not under arrest, Ms. Thompson. We just need to sort this out properly." At the station, they took me to a small room with a table and chairs. Another officer, a woman named Garza, came in to take my statement. I went through everything again, trying not to leave out any details. After I finished, she left me alone for a while. I sat there wondering if I'd have to call a lawyer, if I'd have a criminal record now, if I'd lose my job. The minutes crawled by. Finally, Officer Rodriguez returned with a cup of water for me. "Ms. Thompson, I want to tell you something about the man on the bus," he said, sitting across from me. My stomach tightened. "His name is Eric Lindell. He's been arrested multiple times for stalking women. He served 2 prison sentences for physical and sexual assault." I felt like I might throw up. All of his victims were strangers he encountered on public transit, and according to those who pressed charges, it always started the same way, with him touching their hair. The room seemed to tilt around me. I took a sip of water to steady myself. "What happens now?" I managed to ask. "Am I in trouble for breaking his fingers?" Officer Rodriguez shook his head. "Lindell isn't pressing charges against you, probably because he knows we'd throw the book at him if this went to court, and the DA has already decided not to pursue assault charges against you. It's clearly self-defense." I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. The officer hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "Off the record, Ms. Thompson, I hope to God my daughter would do exactly what you did if she ever found herself in that situation." He drove me home afterward. I sat in the back seat of the patrol car staring at my hands. They looked normal, not like they had just broken someone's bones. I kept replaying that moment in my mind, the sound, the feeling. Part of me felt sick about hurting another person. But another part felt powerful for the first time in my life. When we reached my apartment, Officer Rodriguez gave me his card. "Call if you need anything or if you think of any other details." I nodded, thanked him, and went inside. That was 5 days ago. I haven't taken the bus since. I've been carpooling with a coworker, making excuses about car trouble. I can't stop thinking about what Officer Rodriguez told me, that this man had hurt other women, that I could have been another victim. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night feeling phantom fingers in my hair. I've started wearing it in a tight bun. I jump when people get too close to me, but sometimes I also catch myself looking at my hands with a strange sense of wonder. These hands protected me. When it mattered most, some part of me that I never knew existed took over and kept me safe. I don't know if I'll ever feel normal on public transit again. I don't know if I'll ever stop looking over my shoulder or flinching when someone sits too close. But I do know this. I'm still here. I'm okay. And maybe that's enough for now. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. For nearly my entire life, I thought this was just a nightmare I had when I was little. I mean, I was so young, 4, maybe 5 years old. The memory was always there, but I tucked it away as just another scary dream from childhood. Until last week, when I found out it wasn't a dream at all. I'm in Colombia right now with my twin brother Mark and my older sister Elena. We came because our dad's health took a serious turn for the worse about a month ago. By the time we all made it here, he was already in the ICU, tubes everywhere, barely conscious. The doctors told us it was just a matter of time. Heart failure. His body was shutting down. Last night, Dad passed away. We're all staying at his house now, going through his things, making arrangements. None of us have really slept. It's been a lot of reminiscing, crying, laughing at old photos, and drinking way too much of Dad's whiskey collection. It was around 3 a.m. when the conversation turned to childhood memories. We were sitting in the living room, surrounded by boxes of old photo albums. Elena was flipping through pictures from the early 90s when Mark started talking about this recurring dream he used to have about falling from a treehouse. "What about you, Mike?" Elena asked me. "Did you have any weird dreams as a kid?" Without even thinking, I mentioned the one that had stuck with me all these years. I had this nightmare when I was super little. There was this bald guy with these insanely blue eyes staring at me through my bedroom window. I remember waking up screaming. I was about to laugh it off when I noticed Elena had gone completely still. The photo album slipped from her hands. "That wasn't a dream, Michael," she said in a voice that made my skin crawl. "That actually happened." I thought she was messing with me at first, but the look on her face, I'd never seen her look so serious. "What are you talking about?" I asked, feeling suddenly cold despite the humid Colombia night. And that's when she told me the story, a story that had apparently been real all along. Elena was around 10 at the time. For a few weeks, she'd been telling Mom and Dad that she felt like someone was following her home from school. Dad had even started picking her up for a while, but eventually, he had to go back to his normal work schedule. Mom just told Elena she was being dramatic, that it was probably just other kids from school walking the same way. But Elena insisted. She said there was a man, tall, completely bald, always wearing the same jacket. And his eyes, she said, were the most startling blue she'd ever seen. As she was telling me this, I felt my stomach drop. Those blue eyes, I remembered them so vividly from my nightmare. They were almost too blue to be natural, like someone had cranked up the saturation. One night, Elena thinks it was sometime in late October because she remembers the Halloween decorations being up. She woke up around midnight to the sound of her window sliding open. We lived in a single-story house back then, and all of our bedroom windows were pretty low to the ground. Elena said she saw a hand pushing up the window, and then those blue eyes appeared in the gap. She screamed, and the man immediately ducked away. Dad came running into her room, and she managed to tell him what had happened between sobs. Dad grabbed the baseball bat he kept by their bed and ran outside. Mom came into Elena's room and was trying to calm her down when they heard me screaming from my room, which was right next to Elena's. "The guy must have moved to your window after Dad chased him away from mine," Elena explained, her voice shaking even after all these years. Mom grabbed both of us and took us to their bedroom. She was on the phone with the police when Dad came back inside. Dad had chased the man through our backyard and into the wooded area that led to the rail yard behind our neighborhood. He lost him in the darkness, but he was convinced it was the same man Elena had been describing for weeks. I sat there in shock as she told me all this. The details matched my nightmare perfectly. The bald head, those unnaturally blue eyes staring at me through the glass. But in my memory, that's where it ended. I didn't remember Mom coming to get me or going to their bedroom or anything about the police. "Why didn't I know about this?" I asked, looking between Elena and Mark. "Why didn't anyone ever tell me?" Mark looked just as stunned as I felt. "I don't remember any of this," he said. "Was I there?" Elena nodded. "You were asleep in your room the whole time. You could sleep through anything back then. And Mike, you were so young. I think Mom and Dad just decided not to talk about it. They didn't want to scare us more than we already were. They installed those security bars on all the windows the next day, remember?" I did remember the bars. They were always just part of the house in my mind, something that had always been there. But now that she mentioned it, I had a vague memory of a man coming to put them in, the sound of drilling, the smell of metal. "Did they ever catch the guy?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine despite the warm night. Elena shook her head. "The police came that night, took a report. They increased patrols in our neighborhood for a while. I remember they showed me some photos of known sex offenders in the area, but none of them were him." "Sex offenders?" I repeated, suddenly feeling sick. "Yeah," Elena said quietly. "They thought he might have been targeting me specifically, following me home from school and all that." The realization of what could have happened hit me like a truck. This wasn't just some random break-in attempt. This man had been stalking my 10-year-old sister. And then he tried to get into my window after being scared away from hers. "Dad was so angry," Elena continued. "For weeks afterward, he would patrol the house at night with his bat. He installed those motion sensor lights all around the yard. Mom wanted to move, but we couldn't afford it." As Elena talked, fragmented memories started coming back to me. The new lights that would suddenly flash on when we were playing in the yard, Dad checking the windows and doors every night before bed, something I always thought was just a normal dad thing to do. "About a month after it happened," Elena said, "Dad thought he saw the guy hanging around my school again. He called the police, but by the time they got there, the man was gone. After that, Dad started teaching me self-defense moves. Remember how he signed us all up for those karate classes?" I did remember the karate classes. I was so young that I thought it was just a fun activity Dad had found for us. I had no idea there was such a terrifying reason behind it. "So what happened after that?" I asked. "Did the guy ever come back?" Elena shook her head. "Not that I know of, but things were different after that. Mom wouldn't let us play outside unless she or Dad was watching. I wasn't allowed to walk home from school by myself anymore." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of this revelation hanging over us. All these years, I'd dismissed this memory as just a childhood nightmare, something my young mind had conjured up. But it was real. Someone had actually tried to break into my bedroom window when I was just a little kid. "Why didn't Dad ever tell me about this?" I asked, feeling a mixture of confusion and hurt. "Even when I got older?" Elena shrugged. "I think they just wanted to protect us. You were so young. They probably hoped you wouldn't remember it at all." And I almost didn't. If not for those eyes, those piercing blue eyes that had stayed with me all these years, I might have forgotten the whole thing. "I can't believe this," Mark said, shaking his head. "I have no memory of any of this happening." "You were a heavy sleeper," Elena said, "and after it happened, Mom took us all to Aunt Lisa's house for a few days while Dad installed the security bars and lights. They probably just told you we were going for a visit." I got up and walked to the window, peering out at the dark street. It was so strange to think that a memory I'd carried with me my whole life, something I'd always believed was just a nightmare, was actually a real event, a potentially life-changing event, if things had gone differently. "Did they ever figure out who he was?" I asked. Elena shook her head. "Not that I know of. The police took fingerprints from the windows, but I don't think they found a match in their system. This was before DNA testing was common, you know, and security cameras weren't everywhere like they are now." I turned back to her. "And Dad never mentioned this guy again? Not ever?" "Well," Elena hesitated. "About a year after it happened, there was a news report about a man who got arrested for breaking into a house a few neighborhoods over from ours. I remember Dad watching the report really intensely, and then he made a phone call, I think to the police, but I don't know what came of it. I felt a sudden urgency to know everything. Did they show the guy on the news? Was it him?" "They showed a mugshot," Elena said, trying to remember. "He was bald, but I couldn't tell about his eyes from the black and white photo in the newspaper. Dad seemed to think it might be the same guy, though." I sat back down, trying to process all of this, and now Dad's gone, and we'll never know for sure. The three of us sat in silence, the realization hanging heavy in the air. Our father had taken whatever he knew about that night to his grave. The man with the blue eyes would remain a mystery, a real-life boogeyman from my childhood who actually existed. Later that night, after Mark and Elena had gone to bed, I found myself drawn to Dad's study. I started going through his filing cabinets, not sure what I was looking for, but feeling like I needed to find something, anything, that might shed more light on what had happened that night. In the bottom drawer, behind some old tax returns, I found a manila envelope labeled Police Reports. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were photocopies of police reports from October 1989, the year it would have happened, based on my age. The report confirmed everything Elena had told me. The attempted break-in at her window, then mine. The description of the suspect, approximately 6'2", completely bald, blue eyes, wearing a dark jacket. But there was also a follow-up report I hadn't expected. 2 weeks after the incident at our house, a similar break-in was reported 3 streets over. Same description, tall, bald, blue eyes. But this time, the man had actually gotten inside the house. He fled when the family dog started barking, but not before he had entered a 7-year-old girl's bedroom. I felt sick reading this. The report noted that nothing was stolen, suggesting the intruder's motives were likely not theft-related. There was a newspaper clipping, too, dated almost exactly 1 year after our incident. Local man arrested for home invasion. The article described how a 34-year-old man named Thomas Reeves had been arrested after breaking into a home in our area. The article mentioned he had a history of similar break-ins and was suspected in several unsolved cases. Attached to the article was a handwritten note in what I recognized as my father's handwriting. Showed Elena the photo. Not him. Wrong man. So the police had arrested someone, but it wasn't our intruder. The man with the blue eyes was never caught. I put everything back in the envelope, my mind racing. All these years I'd written off one of the most frightening moments of my life as just a bad dream. But it was real. And what's more terrifying, the man who tried to break into my bedroom window that night was never found. As I crawled into bed in my dad's guest room, I couldn't help glancing at the window, making sure it was locked. The security bars Dad had installed at our old house suddenly made so much more sense. I wondered if that man was still out there somewhere. He'd be older now, in his 60s probably, but those eyes, those unnaturally blue eyes, would still be the same. I haven't told Elena about the police reports yet. We're all dealing with enough right now with Dad's passing. But I can't stop thinking about that night, about how differently things could have gone if Elena hadn't woken up when she did, if Dad hadn't been so quick to respond. My childhood nightmare was real, and somehow that's so much worse than any dream could ever be. I'm still not sure why I'm typing this out. It's been nearly 50 years, but sometimes at night, I still wake up in a cold sweat thinking about that Sunday in '76. I guess writing it down might help me process it. My therapist certainly thinks so. I was 16 then. My family had moved to Connecticut from London when I was 9, and I still had a slight accent that made me stand out in our small, affluent town. My parents were the social climbing type, country clubs, cocktail parties, the whole scene. I was expected to be the perfect daughter, which meant hanging out with the right crowd. That's why my friendship with Lily was so unexpected. She wasn't from money like most of my other friends. Her dad worked at the paper mill and her mom was a nurse. But we clicked instantly when we were paired for a science project sophomore year. Lily introduced me to a different kind of life, hiking, fishing, camping under the stars. Things my parents would have turned their noses up at. She was confident and independent in a way I'd never been allowed to be. I craved that freedom. That Sunday in late September started like any other weekend adventure. My parents thought I was at Caroline Whitmore's house studying, which was my usual cover story when Lily and I went exploring. I picked Lily up in my blue Chevy Nova, a sweet 16 gift from my dad, around 7 a.m. We had packed sandwiches, Cokes, and trail mix for a day hike in the hills, about an hour north of town. The area wasn't a formal park or anything, just undeveloped woodland with some unofficial trails that locals knew about. Lily had been there once with her cousin and wanted to show me a particular view from one of the higher points. We arrived around 8:30. The makeshift parking area was literally just a widened gravel spot on the side of the mountain road. No other cars were there, which wasn't unusual for a Sunday morning. Most locals were at church, I guess. "Ready for an adventure, princess?" Lily teased, using her nickname for me that referenced my privileged upbringing. She was wearing cut-off jeans, a faded flannel shirt, and hiking boots that had seen better days. I felt slightly overdressed in my new Eddie Bauer hiking outfit. The climb was steeper than I expected. After about 2 hours of hiking, Lily veered off the main trail. "Trust me," she said, "the best views aren't where everyone goes." I followed her through increasingly dense brush for another hour. My legs were burning, and I was starting to get irritated with Lily's endless energy. Finally, we reached a clearing near the top of one of the hills. The view was admittedly spectacular, rolling hills stretching out toward the horizon, touched by early fall colors. We ate our sandwiches and relaxed for a while, but I was already dreading the hike back down. My new boots had given me blisters, and I was exhausted. "Can we take it slower going back?" I asked Lily, trying not to sound whiny. She agreed, and we started our descent. The way down was even harder on my aching feet, and after slipping twice on loose rocks, I had enough. "Look, there's the road down there," I pointed out. "Can't we just walk along that instead? It'll be easier than this trail." Lily was hesitant. She was always a purist about these things, but she could see I was struggling. We made our way to the road, which wound down the hillside with switchbacks that would eventually lead back to where we'd parked. We had been walking maybe 15 minutes when I heard a vehicle approaching from behind us. The sound of its engine seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet of the woods. It was a rusted red pickup truck, older model, patches of primer visible on the doors and fender. The driver slowed as he approached us, then stopped altogether. "You girls need a ride?" he called through the open passenger window. The man looked to be in his 30s, with a scruffy beard and long brown hair tucked under a baseball cap pulled low. He was wearing a flannel shirt that reminded me of Lily's, but his was stained with what looked like oil or grease. Something about his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I remember noticing his hands on the steering wheel. They were rough and calloused, with dirt under the fingernails. Working hands, my father would have called them. Lily immediately tensed beside me. "No thanks, we're good," she said, starting to walk again. But my feet were killing me, and the thought of walking all the way back down the mountain was unbearable. "Wait," I said. "How far are you going?" "All the way down to the main road," he said. "Happy to drop you wherever you need." I turned to Lily. "Come on, my feet are destroyed. It's just a short ride." Lily gave me a look that I still remember clearly, part frustration, part warning. But I was used to getting my way. "It'll be fine," I whispered to her. The man leaned over and pushed open the passenger door. "Hop in. You can sit in the jump seat behind." I hadn't noticed before, but the truck had an extended cab with a small bench seat behind the main seats. The man reached back and moved some stuff off the seat to make room for us. Lily hesitated, but I was already climbing in. With a sigh of resignation, she followed. The inside of the truck smelled like cigarettes, motor oil, and something else I couldn't identify, something vaguely sweet and unpleasant. The floor was littered with fast food wrappers, empty beer cans, and tools. The upholstery was torn in places, exposing the yellow foam underneath. "Appreciate the ride," I said, trying to be polite as my mother had taught me. "I'm Macy, and this is Lily." "Name's Rick," he said, putting the truck in gear. He didn't offer a last name. As we started moving, I noticed the side mirrors were adjusted in a way that he could see us in the back seat rather than the road behind. Every few seconds, his eyes would flick up to the mirror, watching us. We drove in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes. The road twisted down the hillside, and I started to relax a bit, relieved to be off my blistered feet. Lily nudged me and nodded toward the floor. There was a coil of rope partially tucked under the front seat. Not unusual for a truck, I thought, probably used for hauling things. But then I noticed what Lily was really pointing at, boxes of plastic wrap under the seat, the heavy-duty kind, and several rolls of duct tape. Something cold settled in my stomach. I glanced at Lily, whose face had gone pale. I tried to reassure myself. Lots of people have rope and plastic wrap in their vehicles. It doesn't mean anything. But the longer we drove, the more uncomfortable I became. "How much further?" Lily asked, her voice slightly higher than normal. "Not far now," Rick said vaguely, eyes flicking to the mirror again. I was starting to realize we should have seen other cars by now, maybe even reached the main road. But we were still winding through dense forest, and I hadn't seen another vehicle since we got in the truck. "Actually," Rick said suddenly, "I need to make a quick stop first. Won't take long." Before either of us could protest, he turned onto a narrow dirt road I hadn't even noticed until we were on it. The truck bounced and rattled as we drove deeper into the woods, away from the main road. My heart was pounding now. I looked at Lily, whose eyes were wide with fear. She mouthed something to me that I couldn't make out. After about 5 minutes on this rough road, we came to a small clearing. There was a cabin, little more than a shack, really, with peeling paint and windows covered with what looked like newspaper from the outside. Next to it was a chopping stump with an axe embedded in it. A wood pile was stacked against one wall of the cabin. "Just need to grab something," Rick said, putting the truck in park but leaving the engine running. "You girls sit tight." He got out and walked to the cabin, disappearing inside. The moment he was gone, Lily grabbed my arm. "We need to get out of here, now." "Maybe he really is just getting something," I said, though I didn't believe it myself anymore. "Macy, look around. This isn't right. We need to go while he's inside." I was frozen with indecision. My mother's voice was in my head, telling me not to be rude, that this man had offered us a ride, that leaving would be impolite. "Macy," Lily hissed, already opening her door. "Move." That broke my paralysis. I pushed open my door and we both slipped out of the truck. Lily grabbed my hand and we started toward the tree line. "Wait," I whispered. "My bag." My wallet and keys were in my backpack, still in the truck. "Leave it," Lily ordered, but I was already turning back. I crept to the truck and reached for my bag on the floor. As I pulled it out, something caught my eye on the driver's side floor. A small hatchet, partially hidden under some papers. It wouldn't have been notable except for the dark brown stains on the handle and blade. Dried blood. I must have made a sound because Lily was suddenly beside me, her hand clamped over my mouth. She saw what I was looking at, and her face went completely white. That's when we heard movement inside the cabin. Without another word, we ran for the trees. We crashed through the underbrush, not caring about the noise we were making, just desperate to put distance between us and that cabin. I was crying, stumbling over roots and rocks, my blistered feet forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. Lily kept a death grip on my hand, pulling me along when I would have fallen. She seemed to have some sense of direction, heading downhill consistently. "We need to get to the main road," she gasped between breaths. We ran until we physically couldn't anymore, then walked quickly, listening constantly for sounds of pursuit. The forest seemed to close in around us, branches grabbing at our clothes, roots trying to trip us. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes, we started seeing more light through the trees. The forest was thinning out. "I think we're getting closer to the road," Lily whispered. We slowed our pace, moving more cautiously now. Then suddenly, through a gap in the trees, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The gravel parking area where we'd left my car, and parked right next to it, facing my Chevy Nova, was the rusty red pickup truck. I nearly collapsed. Lily pulled me down behind a fallen tree, putting her finger to her lips. We stayed there, barely breathing, watching the parking area. My car seemed untouched, but there was no sign of the man. "Where is he?" I mouthed to Lily. She shook her head, scanning the area. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows through the trees. We waited for what felt like forever, afraid to move. My whole body was shaking, partly from exhaustion, partly from fear. Just as dusk was settling in, we saw movement. The door of my Nova opened from the inside. I felt Lily's fingernails dig into my arm. Rick emerged from the back seat of my car, looking around carefully. He stood there for a long moment, scanning the tree line. I was certain he could hear my heart pounding. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he walked back to his truck, got in, and drove away, the sound of his engine fading into the distance. We waited another 20 minutes to be sure he wasn't coming back. Then, with Lily leading the way, we ran to my car. The keys were still in my backpack, thank God. We jumped in, and I had the engine started before Lily even closed her door. I threw the car into reverse, then drive, and peeled out of that parking area, gravel spraying behind us. I drove like a maniac down that mountain road, doors still hanging open until Lily finally reached over and pulled hers shut. "Close yours," she yelled at me, and I realized mine was still open too. I slammed it shut without slowing down, taking the curves way too fast, desperate to reach civilization. Neither of us spoke again until we hit the main road and saw other cars. Only then did I ease off the gas a little. "He was waiting for us," Lily finally said, her voice hollow. "In your car." I just nodded, unable to speak through my tears. "What was he going to do with us, Macy?" she whispered. I didn't answer. We both knew. We drove straight to Lily's house. Her parents were home, and I've never been so glad to see adults in my life. We told them we got lost hiking and had gotten scared as it got dark. They believed us, or at least pretended to. I ended up sleeping over at Lily's that night, both of us in her small twin bed, holding hands like we were little kids. Neither of us slept much. We never reported what happened. It was 1976, and 2 teenage girls who voluntarily got into a stranger's truck. We knew how that would be seen. Plus, we had no real evidence, not even a license plate number. Lily and I stayed friends through high school, but we never went hiking again. We never even spoke about that day after the first week. It was like if we didn't talk about it, maybe it didn't really happen. I left for college the next year and eventually moved to California. Lily stayed in Connecticut, got married, had kids. We exchanged Christmas cards, but that's about it. Sometimes I wonder if that man is still out there, if he found other girls who weren't as lucky as we were. I wonder what we would have found if we'd looked in those boxes of plastic wrap under his seat. But mostly, I try not to think about it at all, except on nights when I wake up sweating, hearing the sound of a rusty engine behind me on a quiet mountain road. I've been debating whether to share this for years. Even typing this now, my palms are sweaty, and I keep glancing over my shoulder. Some childhood memories fade, but others burn themselves into your brain like a brand. This is one of those memories that's never going to leave me. I was 4 years old when my mom met Janet at some community fundraiser thing. They hit it off immediately, and before I knew it, Janet and her husband Tom were coming over for dinner with their kids. A boy my age named Ethan, and a girl around my sister Lily's age. I remember my mom gushing about how perfect it was. We'd all be friends, the adults would hang out, and everyone would be happy. Except I wasn't happy, not even close. The first time Ethan came over, my mom sent us to play in my room. "Show Ethan your toys, Charlotte," she said with that voice parents use when they're not actually making a suggestion. I reluctantly led him to my room, which I'd always considered my safe space. I had my dolls arranged on a shelf, my stuffed animals in a basket, and my favorite teddy bear, Mr. Hugs, sitting on my pillow. I still remember the look on Ethan's face when he saw my toys. It wasn't excitement or interest. It was calculating, like he was assessing them. I showed him my favorite Barbie, the one with the sparkly blue dress my grandma had given me for my birthday. "This is Elsa," I said, holding her out but not actually handing her over. He snatched her from my hand. At first, he just examined her, turning her over in his hands. Then, without warning, he gripped her legs and twisted. The plastic cracked, and her leg came off in his hand. "She broke," he said flatly. No emotion, no apology, just stating a fact. I burst into tears and ran to get my mom. When I dragged her back to my room, Ethan was sitting there innocently, and my Barbie was shoved under the bed out of sight. "He broke Elsa," I sobbed, pointing at him. My mom looked at Ethan, who just shrugged. "I didn't do anything," he said. "Charlotte, don't make up stories," my mom scolded. "Ethan's our guest. Be nice." I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe my mom didn't believe me. After she left, Ethan smiled at me. Not a normal kid smile. This was different. His eyes didn't match his mouth. "Let's play with something else," he said. By the end of that first visit, 3 of my Barbies were missing limbs, and my favorite coloring book had pages ripped out. I was a mess, but my parents just thought I was being dramatic about sharing. The visits continued. Every time I begged my mom not to make me play with Ethan. "He's mean," I'd tell her. "He breaks my things." But she'd just say things like, "You need to learn to share," or "He's just playing differently than you're used to." Janet was worse than Ethan, if that's even possible. Once, when I was hesitant to let Ethan use my new crayons, the ones I'd gotten for Christmas that hadn't been broken yet, she called me weird right in front of my mom. "Your little Charlotte is so weird about her things," she said, laughing. "Ethan shares everything, don't you, honey?" My mom just smiled uncomfortably and nudged me to hand over the crayons. She never defended me, not once. It made me feel so small and unimportant, like my feelings didn't matter at all. I later overheard my parents talking about Janet and Tom's parenting style. Apparently, Janet would joke with Ethan about putting him in the oven and cooking him for dinner if he misbehaved. She'd laugh while he cried in terror. My dad seemed concerned, but my mom just called it different strokes for different folks. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it didn't make sense to me why a mom would scare her kid like that. The visits continued for months. Each time, I'd lose another toy to Ethan's destruction. He had a pattern. First, he'd examine the toy carefully, almost admiringly. Then, with calculated precision, he'd find its weakness, the seam in a stuffed animal, the joint in a doll, and exploit it. The satisfaction on his face when something broke was chilling. There was one visit that stands out as different. Ethan brought his own toy, a plastic doctor's kit. When my mom told us to go play, I nearly threw up from anxiety. I was sure he was going to use the toy scalpel to cut up my remaining stuffed animals, or maybe even try to hurt me. Instead, he played normally. He pretended to take my temperature, gave me flu shots with the plastic syringe, and listened to my heart with the stethoscope. It was the only visit that didn't end with me in tears. I remember feeling confused. Was this what playing with other kids was supposed to be like? That one positive experience gave me false hope. Maybe Ethan was changing. Maybe he'd be normal now. I was wrong, so wrong. It happened in summer, the kind of hot, sticky day where the air feels like soup. The adults were having a barbecue in our backyard, drinking beers and laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. My sister and Ethan's sister were inside watching TV, but my mom had insisted I stay outside to get some fresh air. I was playing by myself near the flower beds, making a little village out of sticks and rocks. I was completely absorbed in my little world, creating stories about the stick people who lived in the rock houses. I didn't hear Ethan approach. I didn't notice when he slipped away from the adults and went into my dad's garden shed. I didn't see him find the hedge cutters, the big ones with the long handles that my dad had warned me never to touch because they were very dangerous. The first indication I had that something was wrong was a shadow falling over my stick village. I looked up, expecting to see my mom calling me for lunch. Instead, there was Ethan standing behind me with the hedge cutters open, the two blades positioned on either side of my neck. Time seemed to slow down. I could feel the cool metal against my skin. I could see the concentration on Ethan's face, the same expression he had when he was about to destroy one of my toys. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I was frozen in complete terror. What happened next is burned into my memory in vivid detail. Tom, Ethan's dad, happened to glance over at us. His beer bottle shattered on the patio as he dropped it and sprinted across the yard, moving faster than I'd ever seen an adult move. He literally tackled his own son, knocking him to the ground. The hedge cutters fell away from my neck, landing in the grass beside me. I still couldn't move. I sat there, my stick village forgotten, as Tom grabbed Ethan by the shoulders and shook him, yelling, "What were you thinking? What were you doing?" Ethan's face remained blank. "Playing," he said simply. My mom finally noticed the commotion and came running over. She scooped me up and held me tight, asking what happened. Tom explained, his voice shaking. My dad retrieved the hedge cutters, looking pale and sick. Janet tried to play it off. "Boys will be boys," she said with a nervous laugh. "He was just being silly." "He had hedge cutters around her neck," Tom shouted. It was the first time I'd seen him stand up to Janet. "This isn't normal. This isn't okay." What followed was the most bizarre hour and a half of my young life. Tom insisted that Ethan apologize to me, but Ethan refused. Not in a defiant way. He genuinely didn't understand why what he'd done was wrong. "I was just seeing if they worked," he explained calmly. "On her neck?" Tom was nearly in tears. Ethan shrugged. It was there. The adults moved the discussion inside, leaving me with my sister and Ethan's sister, who had no idea what had happened. I sat in stunned silence, still feeling the phantom pressure of metal against my skin. Eventually, Ethan was marched out to where I was sitting. His face was red, and he was clearly angry, not sorry. "I'm sorry I scared you," he recited in a monotone. Then he added, "But I wasn't really going to do it." I didn't believe him, not for a second. They left shortly after. As they were walking to their car, I overheard Janet telling my mom, "He's just going through a phase. All kids experiment with boundaries." That was the last time I ever saw Ethan. My parents never invited them over again, and Janet never called my mom to arrange another play date. Years later, when I was about 12, I asked my mom whatever happened to them. "Oh, we just drifted apart," she said vaguely. But then she added, "I see Janet and Ethan at the grocery store sometimes. He's grown into such a quiet, charming young man." She actually suggested I might want to see him again, to see how he'd changed. I was horrified. No way was I going to risk being his first murder victim. I'm in my 20s now, and I still think about Ethan sometimes. I wonder where he is, what he's doing. I've searched his name online a few times, half expecting to find news articles about missing persons or unsolved crimes. I haven't found anything, which I guess is good. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, I still feel those cold metal blades on either side of my neck. I still see that empty, calculating look in his eyes. And I still wonder what would have happened if Tom hadn't looked over at that exact moment. Because I know with absolute certainty that Ethan would have closed those hedge cutters. And no amount of time or therapy will ever convince me otherwise. I don't even know why I'm writing this down after all these years. Maybe it's because I was watching the news last night and they talked about a body they found in Ravenwood. Maybe it's because I still wake up sometimes with his words ringing in my ears. I don't know. All I know is I need to get this out. This happened about 8 years ago when I was 26. I used to be really into the goth scene in Ravenwood City. Nothing extreme or anything, just black clothes, dark makeup, that whole aesthetic. I had a solid group of friends who were into it too, and every Saturday we'd hit up this place called the Raven's Nest for their goth night. It was our spot, you know. We knew the bartenders, the regulars, the DJ would play our requests. It felt safe. That particular Saturday started like any other. I got dressed up in my usual black dress and fishnets, did my makeup, met up with my friends Amber, Kyle, and Jess at Amber's place to pre-game a little before heading to the club around 10:30. The place was packed when we got there. Summer nights always brought out more people, tourists, college kids, whoever. We managed to squeeze our way in, paid the cover, and went straight to the dance floor. The music was good that night, lots of Sisters of Mercy, some Bauhaus, that kind of stuff. We were having a blast. After dancing for about an hour, I was seriously thirsty. Told my friends I was heading to get a drink and would be right back. I remember squeezing through the crowd, my boots sticking slightly to the floor where people had spilled their drinks. The bar was packed 3 deep, with people trying to get the bartender's attention. I stood there for a few minutes, scanning for an opening, when I noticed a small gap at the far end of the bar. There was just enough room to squeeze in next to this guy sitting on a bar stool. I remember him clearly. Not super tall, maybe 5'10", slim build, with really dark skin and these incredibly black eyes. He was dressed nice, not goth at all, just a plain black button-up shirt and dark jeans. He stood out because he wasn't dressed like everyone else, and he wasn't with anyone, just sitting there, nursing what looked like whiskey. I squeezed in next to him and caught the bartender's eye, ordered a vodka cranberry. While I was waiting, the guy next to me shifted to give me more space. I thanked him, and being the chatty person I am, especially after a couple drinks, I asked him where he was from. He had this accent I couldn't place. "Ethiopia," he said, taking a sip of his drink. His voice was soft, with this slight accent that made me lean in to hear him over the music. "Oh, cool," I said. "I've never been. What brought you to Ravenwood?" He shrugged. "Work." "What kind of work do you do?" I asked, just making conversation while waiting for my drink. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. His eyes were so dark they seemed to absorb light. "I worked for the government in Ethiopia," he said. "That sounds interesting," I replied, not really knowing what else to say. The bartender handed me my drink and I paid, waiting for my change. The man beside me took another sip of his whiskey, then said, completely matter-of-factly, "I killed people there." I laughed nervously, thinking it was some weird joke or a really bad attempt at flirting. You know how some guys think being edgy or dangerous is attractive? I figured it was something like that. "Oh yeah?" I said, still waiting for my change and planning to head back to my friends as soon as I got it. "So you used to kill people?" He looked at me directly then, his face completely blank. No smile, no frown, nothing. "No," he said. "I still do." A chill ran up my spine. It wasn't what he said. People say weird shit in bars all the time. It was how he said it. Totally emotionless, like he was telling me he still collected stamps or something. "When I decide to kill someone, I kill them," he continued, still in that same flat voice. "There's no trying." The bartender finally handed me my change. I grabbed it, mumbled something like, "Gotta get back to my friends," and moved away as fast as I could without spilling my drink. I could feel his eyes on my back as I walked away. I found my friends still dancing and squeezed in between Amber and Kyle. I didn't tell them what happened. It seemed too weird, and honestly, I thought maybe I was overreacting. But I kept glancing over at the bar, and every time I did, he was still there, still watching me. After about 20 minutes, I saw him get up and walk toward the front door. I felt relieved, thinking he was leaving. The rest of the night, I danced with my friends, had another drink, and tried to forget about the creepy encounter. The club closed at 2 a.m., and people started filing out. Kyle and Jess had left around 1:30, but Amber and I stayed until closing. We were standing near the exit, Amber checking her phone for our Uber, when I felt a hand grab my wrist. I turned, thinking it was someone I knew, but it was him, the Ethiopian man. He hadn't left after all. Before I could react, he pulled me away from Amber and the crowd, into this dark corner by some unused emergency exit. It happened so fast. 1 second I was standing with my friend. The next I was pushed against the wall, one of my arms twisted behind my back. He pressed himself against me, his body pinning mine to the wall. His breath smelled like whiskey and something sour. "I've been watching you," he whispered in my ear. I tried to scream, but the music was still playing as people cleared out, and it was too loud. I couldn't see Amber anymore. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I don't know where I got the strength, but adrenaline is a hell of a thing. He shifted his weight slightly, and I saw my chance. I shoved back against him with all my might, creating just enough space to turn around. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I punched him as hard as I could, right in the groin. He doubled over, making this weird gasping sound, and I ran. I ran through the crowd, screaming Amber's name. I found her near the front door, looking confused and worried. "We need to leave now," I told her, grabbing her arm. I was shaking so bad I could barely speak. I spotted a security guard and ran up to him, trying to explain what happened, asking if we could use the emergency exit since it was closer to where we were standing. He refused, saying it would set off the alarm, and told us to leave through the front door like everyone else. I was terrified of going outside, afraid the man would be waiting. Amber, bless her, quickly gathered a couple of guys we knew from the scene to walk us to my car. I kept looking over my shoulder the whole way, but I didn't see him again. That night, I slept with a chair propped against my bedroom door. I kept waking up, thinking I heard someone in my apartment. The next day, I checked the news obsessively, scared I'd see reports of an attack or murder, but there was nothing. I never went back to the Raven's Nest after that night. My friends thought I was overreacting, that he was just some creep trying to scare me or hit on me in a really messed up way. But they didn't hear how he said it. I still do. No emotion, no trying to be scary or impressive, just stating a fact. Sometimes I wonder if I did overreact. Maybe he was just some weirdo who got off on scaring women in bars. But then I remember his eyes, how empty they were, how they didn't change at all when he talked about killing people, how he watched me all night, waited until I was vulnerable, and grabbed me. I think about serial killers I've read about, how they can blend in, seem normal, walk among us. How many of them would sit at a bar and tell a stranger what they do? I don't know. I've moved 3 times since then, and I rarely go out to clubs anymore. I carry pepper spray everywhere, and I took self-defense classes. My friends think I'm paranoid, but they didn't see his eyes. They didn't feel his grip on my arm, so tight it left bruises. 8 years later, and I still think about it. I still wonder who he was, what he did, if he hurt someone else that night or any other night. I wonder if he's still out there, sitting in some bar, telling some unsuspecting person, "I kill people," in that same flat voice. And the worst part? I'll never know. I'll never know if I narrowly escaped a killer or just had a really creepy encounter with a disturbed individual. All I know is I've never felt that kind of fear before or since, and I hope I never do again. But every time I see a missing person report from Ravenwood, every time I hear about an unsolved murder, I wonder, could it be him? The man with the dead eyes who told me so calmly that when he decides to kill someone, he kills them? I doubt I'll ever know for sure, but I know what I felt that night, and I know I never want to feel it again. I've never told this story to many people. It's still hard to think about, even now, more than 20 years later. But I need to get this out. Maybe writing it down will help me process what happened. I was 5 years old when my family moved into that house in downtown Salt Lake City. It was 1998 and we didn't have much money. The neighborhood was rough, the kind where you'd regularly hear police sirens at night and sometimes gunshots in the distance. Our house was small and needed work, but it was all my parents could afford at the time. The backyard was the worst part. It wasn't a normal backyard like my friends had. This was more like an urban jungle, overgrown bushes, tall weeds, trees with low-hanging branches. There was barely any grass, just dirt paths worn through the vegetation. The worst part was that people used our backyard as a shortcut between streets. My parents would find cigarette butts, empty beer cans, and sometimes needles back there. My dad tried putting up a fence once, but someone tore it down within a week. From the very first night in that house, I hated my bedroom. It faced the backyard, and there was this big window that looked out into all those trees and bushes. My mom had hung these thin white curtains that didn't really block anything. You could see shadows through them easily. I remember telling my mom that first week, "Someone's watching me through my window." She just kissed my forehead and told me it was the trees moving in the wind. But I knew what I saw. It wasn't tree branches. It was a person. Night after night, I'd wake up feeling like someone was staring at me. Sometimes I'd see a dark shape by my window, just standing there. I'd pull my blanket over my head and cry quietly until I fell back asleep or until morning came. I begged my mom to let me sleep in her room, but she thought I was just having trouble adjusting to the new house. "Emma, honey, there's nobody out there," she'd say. "It's just your imagination. You're safe here." But I wasn't safe. And deep down, I think I knew it. There was this one night in late October. I remember because we had just put up Halloween decorations. I woke up around midnight to a scratching sound at my window. Not like tree branches. This was deliberate. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch, pause. I was frozen with fear, staring at the window. Through the thin curtains, I could see a figure, larger than before. The scratching continued, and then I heard a metallic sound, like someone was trying to pry the window open. I screamed louder than I ever had before. My mom came running in, flipping on the light. By the time she got to my room, there was no one at the window. She checked outside my door, then reluctantly looked out my window, but didn't see anyone. She stayed with me that night, but I could tell she was just humoring me. The next morning changed everything. My dad went outside to check around my window and found footprints in the mud. Not just one or two, there were clear signs someone had been standing there for a while. The grass was trampled down like someone had been there multiple times, but worst of all were the scratch marks around my window frame. Someone had definitely been trying to get in. My parents called the police, but they didn't do much. They took a report and said they'd drive by more often. But in our neighborhood, break-in attempts were common. Without anything actually being stolen or anyone being hurt, it wasn't a priority. My dad installed a better lock on my window and put in a security light that would turn on with movement. My mom moved my bed to the opposite wall, away from the window. But we couldn't afford to move to a different house. We were stuck there. Around this time, I became really good friends with Jenny, the girl who lived next door. She was a year older than me and seemed so brave and grown up. We'd play in her yard, never in mine, and sometimes visit neighbors together. One of our regular stops was Mrs. Peterson's house, an elderly lady who lived 3 doors down. She always had cookies or candy for us and would let us watch cartoons on her TV while she knitted. She was nice, but her house had a strange smell, like medicine and old food. Still, the cookies were good, and she'd give us each a small bag to take home. I remember seeing her son a few times during our visits. Mrs. Peterson mentioned he had been away, but was now living with her again. He was a big man with a scruffy beard who rarely spoke to us. When he did come into the living room while we were there, he'd just grab something from the kitchen and disappear again into the back of the house. Mrs. Peterson would get kind of nervous when he was around, talking faster and checking on him frequently. I didn't think much of it then. I was 5, and grown-ups were all kind of strange to me. On April 15th, 1999, I remember the date because it was right after my dad had been stressing about taxes. My mom and I left to pick up dinner. There was a little Chinese place around the corner, maybe a 5-minute walk. We were only gone for about 15 minutes. When we turned back onto our street, everything had changed. There were police cars everywhere, an ambulance with flashing lights, and yellow tape blocking off the road. People from the neighborhood were standing around, looking shocked. My mom grabbed my hand tight and rushed toward our house, worried something had happened there. A police officer stopped us at the tape. "You can't go through here, ma'am," he said. "We live right there." My mom pointed to our house. "What happened?" The officer looked down at me and then back at my mom. "There's been an incident at one of the houses. Are you the Thompsons?" "No, we're the Millers," my mom said, her voice shaking. "We live at 1423. "You're not involved then, but you won't be able to get to your house for a while. We have the whole block secured." While my mom was talking to the officer, I saw one of our neighbors, Mrs. Garcia. She came over looking pale. "Oh my God, did you hear what happened?" she asked my mom, before noticing me and lowering her voice. "It's Jenny's mom. She was attacked in their house." My stomach dropped. Jenny was my best friend, and her house was right next to ours. "What? Is she okay? What about Jenny?" My mom looked terrified. "Jenny's fine. She locked herself in the bathroom and called 911. Her mom's in the ambulance now. It was Peterson's son. He just snapped." Mrs. Garcia made a stabbing motion with her hand before catching herself, realizing I was watching. We ended up staying at my aunt's place that night since we couldn't get back to our house. My mom tried to shield me from what was happening, but I overheard enough. Jenny's mom had been stabbed multiple times by Mrs. Peterson's son. He thought Jenny had been making fun of him earlier that day when we'd walked past their house. Jenny hadn't even noticed him watching us from the window. The next day, his picture was on the local news. My mom was watching it while I played with some toys on the floor, not really paying attention. Then I looked up at the TV and saw his face. I dropped my toy and started crying hysterically. My mom rushed over to me, asking what was wrong. "That's him! That's him!" I kept saying, pointing at the TV. "That's the man who watches me through my window." My mom didn't believe me at first. She thought I was confused or that the news story had scared me. but I was absolutely certain. I recognized his eyes, his beard, the way he tilted his head slightly to one side. I had seen that face framed in my window countless nights, watching me sleep. The realization hit my mom like a physical blow. She sat down hard on the couch, hand over her mouth. All those nights I'd been terrified. All those times I'd told her someone was watching me. It had been him, Mrs. Peterson's son, a violent criminal who had been released from prison just months before we moved to the neighborhood. We learned later that he had a history of violence and had been in prison for assault. He'd been watching not just me, but other children in the neighborhood. The police found a notebook in his room with observations about kids' routines, when they left for school, which windows they slept behind, which houses had dogs or security systems. My name was in that notebook. So was Jenny's. What haunts me most is what could have happened if we hadn't gone for Chinese food that night. The police believed he had been planning something for days. What if he had come to our house instead of Jenny's? What if those scratch marks on my window had been successful? Despite everything, we couldn't afford to move right away. We stayed in that house for another year. My dad installed metal bars on my window and bought a baseball bat he kept by his bed. I slept in my parents' room for months. When I finally went back to my own room, I couldn't look at the window. My dad put up heavy blackout curtains, but I still knew it was there. Jenny and her mom moved away after she got out of the hospital. I never saw them again, though my mom told me years later that Jenny's mom survived after multiple surgeries. Mrs. Peterson also moved away, unable to face the neighborhood after what her son had done. Nobody wanted to buy her house, and it sat empty for years, becoming even more run down than the rest of the neighborhood. I'm 30 now, but I still sleep with my blinds closed. I check the locks on my doors and windows multiple times before bed. I've never lived in a ground floor apartment, and I never will. When I hear noises at night, my mind immediately goes back to that scratching sound at my window. The worst part is knowing that while I was telling my mom about the man at my window, he was right next door the whole time, being fed cookies by an old lady who probably knew exactly what her son was capable of but said nothing. Sometimes I wonder if he would have eventually gotten into my room if he hadn't attacked Jenny's mom first. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if my mom had believed me sooner. But mostly, I try not to think about it at all, because even after all these years, I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, feeling like someone is watching me through my window, even when there isn't one. I've never actually shared this with anyone except my immediate family and the police, but I seriously need to get this off my chest. It's been 3 months, and I still get jumpy whenever someone knocks on our door. I still check the locks twice before bed. I still sleep with my bedroom light on. This happened back in March when my parents went out for their anniversary dinner. Dad had surprised Mom with reservations at this fancy restaurant downtown, and they decided to make a whole night of it by getting a hotel room in the city. It was a Friday, and I had no plans, which was fine by me. I'm kind of a homebody anyway, and the idea of having the house to myself for an entire night seemed awesome. After they left around 5 p.m., I ordered a pizza, grabbed some snacks from the pantry, and set myself up in the living room for a horror movie marathon. The irony isn't lost on me now. I had just started watching The Strangers, of all freaking movies, when I heard it, this super soft knock at the front door. It was so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. It was around 7:30 p.m. and still light outside, so I wasn't immediately creeped out. I paused the movie, went to the door, and looked through the peephole. There was a man standing there, slim build, maybe mid-30s, wearing what looked like a polo shirt with some kind of logo on it. He didn't look threatening, just like a normal guy, so I opened the door but kept the security chain on. "Hi there," he said with this really professional smile. "I'm from Secure Life Home Systems. We're offering special security packages for homes in this neighborhood. Is the homeowner available?" I told him my dad wasn't home and he'd be back tomorrow. I figured that would be the end of it. "Oh, that's unfortunate," he said, seeming genuinely disappointed. "Our team is actually moving to another city tomorrow, so we won't be in this area again for a while. Would you mind if I just gave you some information to pass along? We've already set up most of the houses on your street with our system." That didn't seem weird to me at the time, so I unhooked the chain and opened the door wider. He had this laminated paper with pictures of different devices, doorbell cameras, window sensors, all that stuff. He was pointing to different options, explaining how they work together. Looking back, it was all really basic information you could get from any security company website. "Your house has excellent visibility from the street," he commented, glancing past me into the house. "Do your parents travel much? Or is the house empty during the day?" I remember feeling a slight twinge of unease at that question, but I brushed it off. It made sense that a security company would ask about when the house might be vulnerable, right? "No, not really," I answered. "Someone's almost always home. My dad works from home most days, and when school's out, I'm here a lot too." He nodded, seeming a little less interested after I said that. He asked a few more questions about our current security setup. Did we have cameras? What kind of locks we used? If we had a dog? Nothing that seemed out of place for someone selling security systems. After about 5 minutes, I told him my dad would probably want to make the decision himself and suggested he come back the next day. "Unfortunately, like I mentioned, we're heading to another city tomorrow," he said, "but I appreciate your time. Maybe we'll be back in the area in a few months." He handed me a brochure, thanked me, and left. I went back to my movie without giving it another thought. Around 10 p.m., I was scrolling through Instagram during a break between movies when I saw this post that had been shared by one of my friends. It was from someone who lived in the neighborhood just north of ours, maybe 2 miles away. She described an encounter with a man from Secure Life Home Systems who had knocked on her door that afternoon. Her description matched the guy who came to my house. Same company name, same soft knock, same spiel about setting up systems in the neighborhood, same questions about when the house was empty. But the part that made my stomach drop was what happened next. When she went to get a pen to write down his information, she heard her front door open wider. She rushed back to find him halfway inside her house. When she confronted him, he mumbled something about checking her door frame for the system compatibility and quickly left. She had called the number on the brochure he gave her, and there was no Secure Life Home Systems. The company listed didn't exist. My hands were shaking as I kept reading. She'd called the police, who told her they'd received multiple reports about people posing as representatives from this fake security company. Some were men, some were women, but they all used the same approach, knocking softly, so only someone close to the door would hear it, reducing the chance of multiple people coming to answer, asking about when houses were empty and trying to get a look inside. I immediately called my parents. Dad answered, and I could hear the restaurant noise in the background. I told him everything, my voice cracking as the reality of what might have happened hit me. He told me to lock all the doors and windows immediately and said they were coming home right away. While waiting for them, I went around checking all the locks. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The sliding glass door in the kitchen was unlocked and open about an inch. I never use that door. It leads to our backyard, and I always go out through the front. I hadn't been in the backyard all day. I slammed it shut, locked it, and then jammed a wooden dowel in the track like my dad always does. Then I ran to the living room, grabbed my phone, and locked myself in my parents' bedroom because it was the only room with a deadbolt on the inside. I called the police and told them everything. They sent an officer over right away, and my parents got home while he was still there. The officer checked around the outside of our house and found footprints in the soft dirt beneath our living room window, the window that faces the TV I had been watching movies on. The officer told us that these fake security salespeople had been spotted throughout the county over the past 2 weeks. They believed it was an organized group casing houses for potential break-ins. They would approach houses, figure out who lived there and when they were home, and sometimes try to gain entry on the first visit if it seemed like an easy target. The most terrifying part was when the officer said, "You're lucky you were watching that movie with the volume up." Most likely he heard it from outside and realized you weren't alone, or at least that's what he thought. Except I was alone. The only thing that made him think otherwise was the sound of people screaming in The Strangers, a movie about home invaders who randomly target a couple. The police think he circled around to the back after leaving my front door, planning to break in, but got deterred when he heard what sounded like multiple people in the house. We later found out from neighbors that they'd seen someone walking through backyards that evening. Our next-door neighbor even saw a man trying doorknobs on her back patio before she flipped on her exterior lights, and he disappeared. The police never caught them. The company disappeared from our area after that weekend, likely moving on to another neighborhood or city. They told us these groups often work in an area intensely for a short period, then move on before police can establish a pattern. We installed a real security system the next week. My dad put in cameras covering every entrance. We replaced all our locks. I'm not allowed to answer the door when I'm home alone anymore. But the worst part is knowing how close I came to being alone in the house, with someone who had already tried to get in the back door while I was distracted at the front. I keep thinking about how I told him my parents wouldn't be home until the next day, how I told him I was alone. I still wake up sometimes thinking I hear that soft knock at the door. I don't watch horror movies anymore, especially not when I'm home alone, and I can never shake the thought that the only thing that saved me that night was the sound of fictional people screaming while fictional home invaders attacked them. If you ever get someone at your door selling security systems, verify their identity. Ask for ID, business cards, a number to call their office right then and there. Look at their vehicle. Legitimate companies have marked cars. And never ever tell someone you're home alone. I'm trying to move past this, but it's hard. I keep wondering if they'll come back, or if they've done this to other people who weren't as lucky as me. All I know is that I'm forever grateful for a fictional horror movie that unknowingly prevented a real one.